There we are.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. Thanks.
Oh, I'm excited.
All right. Good. We got a nice turnout this morning. Thanks so much, folks, for tuning in to these lectures. I know they're not really that entertaining, but this is what we got. This is our modality. So I appreciate you being engaged. We're doing pretty well here. A few minutes after 6. I guess we can sort of ease into this thing. It looks like we had about 26 folks on Monday. So it looks like we're doing pretty well. We picked up a few extra people, and we got a nice healthy group here. So that's a good sign. I'm just catching these stragglers here if you're wondering what I'm doing. Admitting everybody into the meeting. Oh, there we go. They're coming in at a trickle now. Okay, so of the folks that are here, did anybody get a chance to have a look at the LMS since Monday to check out section 1.2 or look at any of that material? How are we doing with that? Here's what I'm hoping is going to happen, and that is that you guys are going to be able to sort of move around a little bit as depending on how, what your natural rate of consumption of all this material is. So with the exception of the lectures that I hold back by the week, you can go to the first page of each section. I've given you some stuff to look at in terms of background on the section and what I'm going to cover in the lecture. Then you should be able to access your reading assignments and your PDFs, and there'll be the videos that you can access, stuff like that. If you find that the pace is a little slow, which, gosh, in summer B, I'm hoping that well, I mean, if there's somebody in there that thinks 6 weeks out of a 16-week presentation is moving too slow, then you must be a superhero. But in the event that you want to jump ahead, I'm hoping that you have the comfort and flexibility to do that enough anyway, the way I've got it laid out for you. Also, give you the ability to go back, more importantly, if, because of our time constraints, if there's not enough time in a week to have this sort of interactive one-on-one, you can go back and have adequate information to sort of fill in the gaps. And if you don't, please always reach out to me, and we can get you squared away. I want to share my screen with you now, and whoops, there we go. Share the desktop. Okay. What? Let's go here. Well, no, let's go here. There we go. Okay. Gosh, that threw me now. What am I doing? Here we are. We've covered the getting started. What did I want to say? I added Zoom Essentials on here for you folks. It's really just some basic Zoom instructions. You're probably already totally familiar with it by now. I think I've got all of the meeting links squared away. If you go to the Zoom tab, you should see a Zoom appointment now for each one of our class periods. If anybody spots a problem, or if you have any trouble navigating that for any reason, please reach out and let me know. It's very helpful when you guys find these little bugs to let me know as soon as possible, and then I can fix them right away. What else did I add in getting started? I think that was it as far as the getting started is concerned. So we covered week 1 in a normal format, just basic introduction. And today I want to talk to you more about the camera department, how it's structured, the role of the cinematographer, talk to you a little bit about stuff like that. So I've got a little keynote presentation for you. Loved the Q&A on Monday. That was really terrific. I encourage that as much as possible, especially given the the constraints of being online and then being 6 weeks out of a summer session. I really want to help. I don't want to have any ambiguity. I really want to help you guys understand the concepts in the framework that we've been given. So questions are terrific, and I'll hang out for as long as it takes to satisfy all of your queries. Sometimes my presentations aren't going to run real long. Like this one's only 18 slides today, so after which we hopefully will have some very lively Q&A, and then we can see how you guys feel about section 2. I want to move on to section 3 and 4 next week, so that would be Monday and Wednesday. Okay, so let's take a look here at what I've got for you for today. So I'm asking you the basic question: who's the cinematographer? So I tossed out a question on Monday, and it's your financial aid question, and that was I asked you how many nominations for an Academy Award does Roger Deakins have? And I think I take for granted that you folks will know that name, being that you're film students and so forth. But let's not make that assumption. And let me just throw the question out there to you folks: is there anybody who hasn't heard the name Roger Deakins before? And is there anybody who is unfamiliar with the term cinematographer or director of photography? And are you starting fresh at this point? Is there anybody that is in that?
Uh, I haven't heard of Roger Deakins. I knew cinematographer. I'm aware of his work. I just didn't know who he was until you asked the question.
Okay, and that's totally fair. You know what I try to avoid, but although sometimes it's difficult because it's all of this is very sort of programmed into me at this point in time. Um, it's not uncommon for you to not know the names of cinematographers. In fact, it's quite common that folks don't know who these folks are. And this is one of the reasons why I take this moment to really be revealing about this position, because I think it's easy for young and aspiring up and coming filmmakers to know directors, to know directors' names, to know actors' names. But the reality is, in any one of these conditions, even the low budget stuff, there's a lot of folks involved in making a motion picture, which is part of the interesting uniqueness about filmmaking, which is that it's not a solitary endeavor. You're not one individual out creating everything on your own without the interaction of other people, either to help you create the film or to work in front of the camera for you. So it truly is a collaborative art form in that respect. Now, let me just say that the whole sort of format of this course and my cinematography course for that matter, cinematography 2, I should say, and even my intro course, I show you guys what I call an apex model of motion pictures, the Hollywood cinematic system, right? If I show you the biggest ecosystem and how life occurs, for lack of a better term, naturally in that ecosystem, like how many people are on a crew and what are they all doing, right? I think from that model, hopefully what you can do is then, if that's not your aspiration, if that's not where you want your career to take you, for instance, if you are interested in being a documentarian, or if you're interested in doing corporate video for private sector clients, or um, whatever your particular perspective is on filmmaking, hopefully you can take the largest umbrella model that I'm showing you and scale it down to whatever it is that you think you'll be doing, moving forward in your college career and then after college. So hopefully you can derive all systems out of the biggest subset. that I can offer you. Okay. But it's not uncommon for people to not know the names of cinematographers. And I would seek to rectify that if that's possible, because I think that the role that these folks are performing, the job that they're doing, particularly given that it is focused specifically on the images of a film, that we want to have a little bit of awareness of who they are, how they go about their job, who some of the standouts are in terms of active participants in the industry, and just sort of evaluate what they're doing and get a sense of what they're doing, because it may help you sort of develop your own sense of style. So I was talking to you guys about doing the DP sort of research paper that's coming up here and I think next week. And I indicated to you that there was a list of names, and that the ones that are highlighted are the ones that I've worked for or I know personally. And it's quite a few names. So the point of making you aware of that is not to brag, but it is to say that my point of view of cinematography and how images are created, what I like and what I don't like, has risen and fallen in the standard of those individuals who I've worked for or who I know. They have taught me, they have been my mentors, they have been my professional associates who have shown me over the years how this thing is done, how it works. And they've given me my sense of style, my sense of taste and appropriateness. And then I have taken that aggregate information from all of those people, and I have taken what I like, discarded what I don't, and managed to create my own sense of style and my own sense of preference. And I think that's what reflecting on all these people hopefully is going to do for you guys. So if you don't know, for instance, if you are intrigued by images, maybe you like photography a lot, and so this is something that you are interested in, but you don't necessarily know how you would approach a motion picture, or you're not necessarily sure how to identify your own style. What I want to do is tease out that awareness for you, help you sort of figure that out by showing you some folks, what they do, how they go about their job. And then you can cherry pick from all of that information and start creating your own sort of professional modus operandi, if you will. How you're going to tackle films moving forward in terms of their complexity and creation. So I love these old images. I try to put them in my presentations wherever possible. They serve a couple of purposes. The first is some of them are kind of funny, especially to see some of the weird Rube Goldberg looking equipment that they had in the early days of filmmaking. See some of these amazing characters like this guy right here. I mean, you would never see this guy on a modern motion picture set. He's just gone the way of the dodo bird. But it's really, really important, I think, to see some of these images. Some of these images date back over 100 years at this point. And the idea here is that this is a long tradition, the art of cinematography, and the industry of filmmaking is very old at this point. It was really, in truth, born in the late 1880s and has been evolving ever since. And so the framework that we're in today, where we have come to find ourselves, is the result of a long process of evolution. And it is the result of a lot of hard work, a lot of passion, a lot of creative expression by a lot of people for a long time. And therefore, understand that you are becoming a part of a very grand fraternity, a tradition that has founded itself quite successfully and has permeated at this point almost every aspect of our lives in one way, shape, or form. Images, symbology, how we consume them, as members of a society has become prolific. I mean, it's everywhere, even at the gas station, at the gas pump. When you're filling your tank with gas, there's probably a little screen on the pump somewhere, and it's going to show you some content, a commercial or an some advertisements, something that has been created by individuals who have image making and filmmaking somewhere in their paradigm. May not be cinematic necessarily, but it's certainly content creation. And cinematography is a big part of that. So I'm just trying to create a big picture for you that you can sort of get comfortable with, and resist the notion that anything that we're doing here is new, because it's not. It is refined, it is evolved, but it's not necessarily new. And hopefully that will help you sort of process some of this information. So I only do this for a couple of these presentations, and then I stop doing it because usually we're further into the semester. But I just want to just point out a few more key dates for you in the calendar. This should say summer. I apologize for that. Oh, I might as well not hover on this page at all. Actually, I just noticed that all these dates are wrong. Just remember that Friday, your financial aid assignment is due. That was the question. How many Academy Award nominations has Roger Deakins received? Also on Friday is your ad drop deadline, your drop swap deadline. All of that's on Friday. Okay. So just be, I know some of you are really relying on your financial aid. And if that's the case, make sure you get that assignment into them so they can process you as quickly as possible so your payments aren't delayed. A really good source of information about the film department comes from their operational portal. And so I'm just pointing that out to you here really quickly. You can get a lot of information from the portal later this summer. In a couple of weeks, you may be using the portal to check out some camera equipment. You may or you may not. I don't know how far afield some of you are, whether you're out of town at this point and doing this online, or whether you're here in Orlando. But if you elect to borrow equipment from UCF to do your project or your assignments, the portal is going to help. I was told by the folks there on Monday afternoon that the reason the link was unresponsive on Monday was because they're waiting for ad drop to be over, so that they have the current roster of students who are enrolled. And then those students get an access code to get into the rental forms and all of the stuff relative to cinematography. Okay, so bear with us in terms of that function in the modules on web courses. That link isn't quite ready. It should be ready on, he said, Monday afternoon at the latest. So look out for that come the first of next week. Okay, but there's other things you can get from the operational portal. For instance, their entire equipment inventory is listed here as a pull down menu. What they do and who's involved can be accessed here. They have training and public events through the operational office. Usually on stage, they might schedule, say, an equipment demonstration, something they have to offer in the equipment room, and they want to train folks before they send the gear out. They might have guest speakers. They might have events like meet and greets. And sometimes they have film presentations and so forth that happen over at the SVAD building on campus, where we have the full-blown theater system over there. So there's information that you can get from the events tab on the operational portal as well. And then some interesting links that they have. They also have some training videos, some tutorials and things, not just on cameras, but on editing systems, sound systems, operating some of the equipment that's available in the facilities and so forth. So this is a good tool, point of reference for you. You don't have to check in a lot, but you might want to pop in maybe, I don't know, once a month or every couple of weeks and just see what what the headlines are, and just be aware. Today I want to cover what cinematography is, and I want to get your input on this. I want to see if anyone, I want to see how you guys define cinematography for yourselves. And then I want to talk to the question of who specifically is a cinematographer. We can look at the bios of some of these guys, talk a little bit about their reel in terms of group discussion. And then if there's some time and I haven't bored you folks completely to tears, we can watch a couple of these videos. They're pretty nice. So moving forward, I've got this really neat little film that was done by some folks. I think they did it in the Netherlands. It's a little corny, but I think it touches on the emotion of the cinematographer and what's going on with that individual. So I'm going to blow it up full screen here for you, and let you take a look at that and see what you think. So let's see what it's like to be a cinematographer. And let's go.
What does it mean to be a cinematographer? Is it something more than simply positioning a camera, lighting a couple of frames? What I feel when I walk on set goes far beyond that. Setting up the lights, framing the actors. Before I walk on set, there's only darkness. Everything lacks meaning. Before I walk on set, there are just words in an actor's head. Painted walls with hanging curtains, like the world before God conceived it. When the light falls into place, the most ordinary things seem to shine, and your images shine with them. When the camera finds its place, everything else slots in. But before the light rests, before it filters through the lens, I've got to go on set and face the nothingness, see the world before it existed. That moment, when I go on set, nothing's changed, but at the same time, everything's different. Knowledge and technology don't mean anything without the gift of seeing what others don't. You can have cameras that are better than the human eye, lights more powerful than the sun, but my job is to be able to see in the dark. To be the first to see what you see, how you see it. To go onto an empty set and give it meaning. At that moment, you realize that you were made to be here. That you were made to be a cinematographer.
Okay. See if I can get out of this full screen mode. There we go. Oh, wait. There we go. There we go. Okay. So, yeah, a little melodramatic, maybe. If you want a little bit of a chuckle, there is another video online that pokes fun at this one specifically called Being a Cinematographer. And I think it's got funny after it or something. It's on YouTube. And they poke fun at it, but I think the whole point is it's trying to kindle or elicit emotional responses about the idea of being a cinematographer. That it's passionate, it's very creative. You must be responsive. You have to be open to possibility, capable of thinking outside of the box. All of these attributes that I think we could all agree are virtuous attributes, ways of approaching our creative essence that are productive and valuable. And so this is sort of what I'm getting at. And the idea is, and not in a bad way, but I want to instill in you a sense of your own control over what these these resources and these options are, so that when you are in the mode of creativity, that you're not reactive, that you're proactive. So understand the variables at play, understand the constraints affecting how you can approach the work, and then use all that information to elicit the images that you want your audience to see, not merely the images that you have in front of you that you're capturing. It's not enough to simply capture the image if you're going for a cinematic essence in your work. Capturing the image is only a small part of it. Crafting the image is what we're getting at here. So if you don't like the way the lighting looks, change it, and change it with knowledge and experience and preference. If you don't like the point of view of the lens, change it, pick a different lens. The shots, the things that you choose to put in front of your camera are really, really important. You know, we don't just arrive at a set and put the camera in the corner of the room on the widest lens and then hope that something dramatic or ironic or significant happens in front of us while we push record. We want to see specific things, and we want to show those things to the audience in specific ways and in specific orders. So cinematography is very deliberate, okay? And the control is, for the most part, rests solely with that individual through appropriate guidance, obviously. You know, the director has a sense of what a film is going to be about. They've been very close to the information and the story ever since pre-production, and they've been thinking about it and what the images might look like and how the characters might react and move within their spaces. And so a person who maybe has had 2, 3, 4, 6 months of pre-production before filming actually starts has had ample time to start developing all this precognition about what they want the film to look like, right? And then the cinematographer comes on board, and it's the cinematographer's idea or job rather to get up to speed on what that vision is that the director has been nurturing for all of these weeks or months prior to shooting, and come up with a common language that corresponds visually with the printed text, the script, right? And blend those two modes to get the most effective communicative experience for the audience, telling them things verbally and non-verbally. So so cinematography is the non-verbal portion of our communication with the audience, right? So the script speaks to the story specifically, the actors inflect with performance, and then the cinematographer adds the visual essence to the process. And then we have sound and we have music and all of the artistic contributions as well. And the whole thing is cinema, right? So here's an interesting frame that I always include in my Cinematography 1 intro lectures. This is an old friend, Nancy Schreiber. She is in the American Society of Cinematographers. She is a working cinematographer in Hollywood. And she's one of my favorite people that I've ever worked with for a couple of reasons. Number one, you know, the obvious point is that she's making her way as a cinematographer in the film industry, which has been, at least until recent years, prevailingly male. But she's breaking down a lot of barriers, and she has been for a long time. And she's making it possible for us to get, you know, new and up and coming cinematographers who are female, who are offering those perspectives to the medium, tempering the craft of cinematography with that point of view. And we're getting some really terrific contributors coming out of that new openness. Reed Moreno is one individual who comes to mind immediately for me. Reed is a well, when she first came on the scene, she was a young cinematographer right out of film school up in New York. I think she went to Tisch. And really great sense of style, really great reel. Her work is beautiful. It's very luxurious. And she has been responsible for a lot of interesting contemporary images that you may or may not have seen. If you're going to do a paper and you are specifically interested in female cinematographer to research and talk about, I would check out Reed Moreno. She would be an excellent choice. She's had a lot to do with that show, Handmaid's Tale, if any of you know that. I think she directed the first several episodes and had a lot to say about the cinematography, having been an ASC member herself. She's still on the active roster, by the way, and she's already moving up to director. So these folks, I'm hoping, are inspirations for the young women out there who are looking for their own role models and their own heroes to sort of to follow. Nancy is a great example of that. She started off in New York as a production assistant, and then found her sort of talents lied in set lighting, and so she became a set lighting technician, worked through the ranks of the set lighting department in the New York IATSE till she became a gaffer, lit several projects and as a gaffer, and then eventually started looking towards the camera department for her next sort of step in her upward mobility in terms of her career, and started getting shooting jobs. She relocated from New York to LA, which is a hard thing to do, and became a cinematographer and works out in LA as a cinematographer to this day. So she's come up through the ranks all the way, the rank and file, all the way from production assistant, all the way up to cinematographer. And she has done it with grit and hard work, tenacity, and I think a great taste and a great deal of skill. Check her out. She's also on the list for the cinematography spotlight paper that you're going to be doing. She's another excellent example of somebody moving in and shaping the industry. I mentioned the Cook Optics TV videos. Here's one that we'll take a look at now. This one is asking a very specific question, and you should think about this now. Start thinking about it as a cinematography student. What do you think makes an image cinematic? Okay, so you've got images that you could take on your cell phone. You got images you could take with a traditional camera. You got images you could take with a video camera, images you could take with a digital cinema camera. What's the difference? Is it the equipment? Is it the mindset? Is it your approach? Is it a pattern you're following? And think about that. And this question was posed to a number of active cinematographers. I think it was at the Amsterdam equipment broadcast show that they have every year. And it's just asking a bunch of cinematographers what their definition would be. And it's interesting to hear the variety of responses.
A cinematic image to me is...
I'm not going to tell you precisely what it is.
It's a combination, basically, of a lot of factors.
The first thing is a desire.
So that doesn't stick to reality at all.
So it's all sorts of angles of approach.
Is what you say it is.
I don't know. There isn't any answer.
And that's what makes a cinematic image.
What desire do you have to create this image, okay? It's what do you have in your mind, what your imagination creates before arriving on the set.
As an audience, you're sitting in a cinema, and the story, the film moves you.
For me, it's a structure of all the parameters and the way you control it, and starting with the lens. I can't imagine arriving on a project without having decided about the lens. If I don't know which lens I'm going to use, which prime lens I'm going to use, I will be terribly lost.
But I think that what's interesting, and again in the past 4 or 5 years, is that the technology that people get to use on TV and to get to use in feature films is actually exactly the same stuff. So the same cameras, the same sensor size, the same lenses, all of those things are now available, which I think is brilliant.
Well, I don't think there is a cinematic look. I mean, you just have to look at the range of films that one can see out there, and, especially now, shot on so many different cameras. Some are even shot on iPhones or on a Lexus 65.
It is the story, for sure. 80% of the film is the story. But the way it's told is what tops it up. It can be more effective if it's more if it's shot the right way.
I would say that's very much dependent on what's going on in the shot. The frame, you're capturing the acting, what's been staged. You're in there with the director, looking at it, analysing how it's going to be covered, how it's going to be photographed, whether one angle is enough to capture it, either static or with the camera moving. Are you going to shoot the scene in a number of cuts? Now that's really it. That is really it.
What makes it cinematic is when the choices you make click together well with the story.
There is an argument to say it is what you say it is. It is how you present it. I'm not sure. I think it's just the sort of sensibility, really. How you decide you want to tell a story, and you get that story in the most immediate way that you can. I think it's what you say it is, really.
But in a way, it's where you put the camera that's very important, and that's what makes a cinematic image, is where you place that camera.
A cinematic image to me is something that's not contrived, something that is subtle, something that's been thought through. It's not just a close-up, and it's not just a closer.
I would say a cinematic look is a look that doesn't stick to reality, but doesn't go further, that you don't notice more than the story or the script. It's a sculpted image with deep blacks and a high contrast, and on which you can find, again, quite a big gap between the warm light and the cool light. So that doesn't stick to reality at all, which is still justified according to the script.
It's a combination basically of a lot of factors. It can be the time of day, it can come from the script. If you're shooting a feature, it should definitely come from the script. If you're shooting a commercial, it's all about the style, it's all about the look. It certainly comes from the lenses. The lenses basically are the brushes. The lights are also part of the style as well. I think for me, lighting is probably everything. Lighting is more important than probably almost anything else because you can do so much with it. And finally, the style comes from camera movement, composition, set design, backgrounds, wardrobe, what the actor is wearing. Sometimes I think we're not so much in the film business, we're really in the fashion and style business, aren't we? Creating a mood, trying to convey an emotion.
I think I have no answer to that, because the hardest thing when you begin to work on a movie is to find your place in the director's brain. And I think if the directors have cinematic idea, for technician is not a problem to make cinematic images. There's as many definition as directors. Each good director is a new cinematic direction.
It's taking backgrounds into relation, it's taking the foreground into relation, and it's taking the subject within that picture, encompassing everything. Where the light's kicking off, what can I shoot through, how can I slide off, and what the background's doing, what the focal length is doing with the background lights.
I don't know. You know what? I've never knew that. I read it all the time on a commercial pitch, and they say we wanted to make it look cinematic. And I wanted to ask the same question. I don't know. There isn't any answer. I think you should, one should do the story how they see it in the best way and give it the space.
And sometimes, a lot of times, I watch films and I think, shouldn't have put it there, shouldn't have done it from there. It doesn't work. And they've missed the very essence of cinema. What the scene requires. What does this scene require? What's the weight of the scene? What's the aspects of the scene that are really important here? Like from whose point of view, from whose perspective? Where is the acting here? You know, who is the story and everything? I really, really think about it with the director.
All the parameters with the workflow are really, really important. But for me, it's a kind of creating the team, the workflow team around the project. And the people who is going to be around the camera, the way they around in the post-production are very important for me. And I really care about this. Meeting them before they know what the director has in his mind and the structure of the image, which is especially dedicated for this film. Each film has its own history. So you can't imagine a film without having something in your mind which gives you the feeling of the way you're going to choose the lens, you're going to choose the camera, you choose the style of grading. So it's a lot of anticipation. But that's what I like.
Lots of TV show represents an influence for the features, right? And I guess that it's because TV shows have become cinematic, and that's the way production directors, DPs, production designer, they do approach TV show as if they were starting a feature. It's pretty much the same way of it's the same approach and the same goal.
Lots of really well-known DPs have started doing TV, so they might do film and they do TV. So what's the difference between those two things? I guess what it comes down to is ultimately a grammar and the approach to doing film, and doing a film script maybe that's different to a TV script. TV stuff is often done in bigger parts, so there's more stuff. It's more of a stretched out thing, so that maybe the stories are more complicated. And then there's this idea of there's more talking, so there's more story to cover. So the coverage is very different. And the way that people like the TV is approached is there's lots of angles. And I think maybe something that's more filmic is a lot more stripped down, and the way that people approach it is more singular. It doesn't need to keep someone's interest because largely they've gone to the cinema, they've chosen to go and see it.
I like to watch a scene perhaps a few times with a director, if it's possible, run it over and over. Run it again. Let's watch it from over here. Let's watch it from over there. Will it work as one? Does it need a number of cuts? And then start shooting it, because so many people, they pile in and they start shooting, and then halfway through, they're lost. We're lost in this coverage, I would call it. The opposite of cinematic image, coverage. Why not go handheld? Get it on the Steadicam, wave it about, and see whether we can get it like that. Rather than absolutely choosing the best that there is in this scene to draw out visually.
Cinematography can be stunning, absolutely stunning, but it stands apart. Have you felt that? You're watching a movie, you say, this is so beautiful, but it takes you out of the film, Sometimes it's dairy, but sometimes you should make a crappy picture, bad-looking images, because they are right for the scene, Should we be running after awards, or should we be running after the right look for the right film, And the right look for the right film is not necessarily beautiful. So what makes it cinematic is that people have found the right look for that particular story.
So, I like that last bit of testimony. So we should not be out making crappy films. Well, that's good advice. But what do you all think of that? What are your impressions of the variety of answers that were offered? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I like when they said that it doesn't have to look particularly pleasing, but if it fits the story. I like that. It has to fit it. You might choose something that looks like cinematically amazing, but it doesn't fit what they're trying to tell you. And that's why some people may not be interested in it. I thought that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think that's one of the better points that come out of that conversation is the appropriateness of the images. And I think so we can even think about the term appropriate and then decide on a definition, because appropriate in terms of simply the word itself, is it right or wrong for the situation, right? So if you're reading the script and the script is, well, I can give you a for instance from my own experience when we did the film Monster. I mean, the lead actress was Charlize Theron, and she's a beautiful woman, but the character she was portraying was ugly on the inside and the outside, unfortunately. And so, would it have been a good idea for us to light her in her best light, you know, so that she looks like she looked, let's say, in the Italian Job? No, I don't think so, because when you are trying to see her, Charlize, as a ruthless serial killer, I don't think you want her to be beautiful. I think you want her to be visually reminiscent of all of those themes: brutality, ugliness, violence, lack of control. And so as a result of that, you have to think very carefully about, how you're going to frame her, how you're going to light her, how you're going to dress her, the wardrobe. She even went so far as to have on weekends off, she would have the makeup department do a special application on her face and visible bust line and arms. They would dab, I think they used rubber cement and dab it all over her skin and let that dry and set. And then she would go home and go to the beach and hang out at the beach all weekend and get a suntan. And then on Monday morning, she would come in and have all of the rubber cement removed from her skin. And what it did was basically give her a freckled, splotchy appearance to her skin, which was more accurate to, I think her name was Eileen Mornos. This character was more accurate to the actual character. And in this way, the persona of Charlize Theron didn't read through the performance of Eileen Wuornos, right? In other words, when you watch the movie Monster, I don't think you see Charlize Theron. I think you see Eileen Wuornos. And of course, I'm not the only one who thinks that way. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences gave her the Academy Award that year for Best Actress. So she transformed, right? So the whole idea that the images have to be appropriate to the script is that's if not the most important thing, it's got to be one of the top three, right? So that's a great um, uh, point to take away from that. Anybody else hear anything that resonated with you?
I thought it was funny when he talked about focusing too much on coverage, just because on my first production, I know that the director was super hung up on coverage, and we probably took like 4 to 5 hours covering just one scene, and it ended up not even making it into the cut. So you just waste time focusing on coverage when it could have just literally been a handheld shot and one and done.
hopefully as a cinematographer, that's where you can help, especially a young director who's not real experienced. Because if a young director comes in with a lot of preconceived notions about how something should be done as opposed to what's required, suddenly the budget and the time constraint become the biggest problems for that director. And as you say, if you get hung up on a lot of superfluous coverage, and end up having to drop scenes or drop shots from other scenes at the end of the day because you can't make your 12 hours or whatever, that becomes a problem systemically over time. And so as a cinematographer, a lot of times that can be your most important, contribution, is to help that director see another way of doing something that can consolidate maybe the work expectation, or make the communicate the idea of the scene or the shot more effectively. This is what we're doing here. So interesting thing about coverage, it's you know it was something that evolved out of television, the technology of television, given that the screens were so small in the beginning, that the coverage was a way for the audience at home sitting on the sofa 8 feet away from a tiny television screen could see larger versions of the actors and the performances as they occurred, instead of wider shots like the cinema was traditionally creating. Because in a cinema you've got a screen that's maybe 60 feet wide, right? And there's no difficulty in discerning the action or what's going on a frame that large when you're sitting in the audience. But the TV at home had its limitations from the technology standpoint. So coverage was kind of born out of that idea. I think coverage has evolved though, and I think it's a mistake to think that coverage can't be an effective tool. It really depends on what you're shooting and what you're saying, what you're trying to say. But yeah, the cinematographer's contribution visually, the nonverbal communication that we offer the director, can sometimes work you out of a sticky production schedule wicket, if you will. Anyone else pick up anything interesting?
Uh, this isn't directly related, I think, to what they were talking about, but just talking about images in general. Recently, a friend and I have been watching the new Loki show on Disney that they came out with, and
Mhm.
in one of the scenes, I don't really want to spoil anything, but there's a particular scene where the Tom Hiddleston playing Loki is looking at something, and it's an event that has already been performed before in the movies, so everyone watching the show already knows what the event is, and it's just for the sake of his reaction as that character, to like, because he hasn't seen that yet because of the whole temporal whatever. So he looks at this event, and it's really powerful because they get this nice tight shot on his face, but then he's like on the verge of tears or whatever because he realizes what his future is going to be, and then it kind of kills it because in the middle of it they kind of, like you said with coverage, they cut back to it just for a second as like a shot reaction shot, like they cut back right before the climax of what he's looking at, and then back to him, and it's just like, well, that kind of just kills the momentum you're building when it could have all just been a oneer and been like, here's him, and then you hear that sound off screen, you got that nice, off screen sound of, oh, that noise, and you know what's happened because you know the scene, and you know he just saw what you've already seen, and now it connects all the pieces, and now he's like, oh, he's rightfully upset with what he just saw. Anyone who's seen the show has probably knows what I'm referring to, but it's just, like I said, with cutting to different angles, and a lot of films that try to go for action will sometimes mess that up too, where it's like, oh, this guy is gonna drop this thing that's gonna move over here. It's like you gotta do like 6 different angles. Like, no, you just need like 2 shots. You don't need like to show every movement of everything that the actor is going to do. You just need to convey what they're doing, not every piece of what they're doing, because it kind of kills it sometimes. It makes it a little confusing.
I think that speaks to the subjectivity of the medium. So you don't agree with the edit, and that's a totally valid point of view, right? I talk about camera movement mostly in cinematography too, but the slow steady creep, we call it, where you're just slowly pushing in on a character. That's a very deliberate form of camera movement that is, by its very design, meant to elicit emotional response from the audience. So if you break that up with a cutaway of any kind, you're really working across purposes from the intent of that shot to begin with, which was to ramp up the emotional engagement the audience has with that character. So the slow, steady creep is the emergence of realization. It's the lifting of the veil. It's the raising of the stakes. It's all of these emotions encapsulated in a moment where you are telling the audience, this is very important. Don't miss this. And when the actor knows that that's what you're doing, that's usually when they bring the lumber. You get dynamic performance, or you don't, but most of the time you do. And the actors know that we have these kinds of tools in our repertoire, and so sometimes they'll save a little bit of that and they'll wait for, I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeMille, as the the zeitgeist says. But that's basically it, right? It's like the actor has saved a little something and they're going to give it to you in that moment. And so are you then going to, toss ice water all over that moment that the actor has offered of themselves and their performance by a cutaway to something superfluous, especially if you've seen the information already? Because the whole point of that sequence that you're describing is so that the audience now gets to see the moment of discovery that the character is having, right? So if we've already seen the other thing, then of course we want to hold on that moment. So, but it is subjective, and there are times when you're going to see your hard work sort of abused a little bit like that, if for lack of a better word. And we have to sort of be okay with it, and hope that everything works out in the end, and that in aggregate your work is considered good, that it doesn't hinge on that one particular violation of your personal style or preference. Anybody else have any thoughts about the video? I thought it was neat that the gentleman, I think it was third or fourth from the last, was referring to cinema in a literary sense. Did you catch that, where he was talking about language? He said specifically that it's the language of the cinema, or the language of television, right? So if you could think of cinematography as a craft discipline that is focused on images, the meaning behind images. So it's subtext. It's sometimes it's the low-hanging fruit. It's the obviousness of an image. Sometimes it's the subtext or the hidden meaning behind an image. And all of it is in service to the message or the premise of your story, right? Hopefully. And so sometimes when we're seeing it on the big screen with an audience, maybe you're in the room with 200-300 other people seeing this giant presentation on a screen, and that whole experience becomes the cinematic mode, right? Or you're alone on your couch and you're watching this thing, right? And then what impression do you have of the presentation as a whole, the story and the images and in the sound maybe? So do you have the same cinematic experience, for instance, if you go to the theaters and watch Halloween H2O with 300 other people, or do you have a different experience when you're all alone on a Saturday night, no date, no homework, nothing to do but sit in the dark with a beer or a soda and watch Jason hack up the cast of Halloween, right? Different experience, different medium, television, smaller screen, more intimate, more personal experience. And the other way is more spectacle, right? More uh, community involvement, if you will. And so these are considerations, right? All of these things are things that the cinematographer is thinking about and sometimes obsessing about or worrying about. Are these aspects of the image that we can sometimes take for granted. So if you can think of cinematography as a language in and of itself, and it speaks in the dialects of color and motion and lenses, shot sizes, in other words, sequence and lighting, and understand that, uh, just like there's, 5 or 6 dialects of Spanish, maybe more. Cinematography has all of those dialects as well. It's not just, put the camera here and shoot it in this direction because the action's going to happen about 10 feet away. We want all of that to be in our purview of control, right?
So one thing,
Yeah, no, please.
so one thing that stood out for me, I mean, they all made great points, but the John Foer guy said something that kind of stood out, and he said something about lenses being the brushes
Yeah.
of cinematography. That was kind of beautiful. And then kind of he went off that with the lighting and the camera movement and the set design, and composition and the wardrobe. I feel like at an artistic standpoint, I think that definitely is kind of what makes like the visuals, basically, for sure. And that kind of stood out to me too.
Yeah. So what do you do, right? If you're an athlete, right, you have tools and you have training, and your tools are balls and bats and helmets and pads or sticks and pucks or nets or whatever, right? If you're a carpenter, your tools are saws and chisels and hammers and, glue. And so cinematographer, our tools are lenses and cameras and lights. And so we develop a sense of style. We have an image in our mind of what we're trying to reproduce or create. And then we take our tools and we apply those tools to the situation. And we do it in such a way that the image is hopefully greater than the sum of its parts. So you can turn a light on in a room and call it lit. And if you take your light meter out in the middle of the room and you take a measurement, and the light meter informs you that there's enough light present to make a good exposure, well balanced, not too bright, not too dark. Yeah, you
That's
could
the
shoot it.
beautiful thing about it. It's like very manipulative, where you can just
Sure.
create what you want and put your image out there. And then going
Yeah.
back to what you said about like um the cinematographer has to be kind of like the director's kind of um guidance on, you got to let this go, man, it's not going to happen. Or I think we got it, it's a beautiful shot.
Yeah, I mean, you should always try to give them what they hope for, because they've been sort of, if you can think of these individuals as these poor repressed creatives that have been sitting in an office for 6 weeks waiting for the crew to get hired so they can have meetings and talk about what they've been thinking about. And you develop expectation, right? You develop a whole set of needs or desires and a plan that you become really connected and attached to. And then you get there on the day, you've got all the gear, all the crew is there, everybody's ready to go, and it's just not working, or you're already challenged with something unexpected, change of venue, lose a location permit, or it rains and you got to go from exterior beach to interior soundstage for a set that you have waiting in case of weather, or the actor gets sick or whatever it is. And then all of a sudden that beautiful plan that you've been hoping and thinking about for 6 weeks is out the window. Right? And so that's when all of us as creative department heads, whether it's the production designer, the cinematographer, the gaffer, we converge on the monitor and we help that director sort of recompose themselves and make the change, whatever spontaneous adjustment that we have to do, and we do it as informed professionals, right? So I think if we can't do what we plan to do, we can maybe do this with the tools we brought with us, and it'll look this certain way. It might not be exactly what we planned for, but I think it will still support the story because this, and this, and then that becomes part of the process as well. It becomes part of the organic, collaborative aspect that we cherish and that we associate with
The
filmmaking.
power of brainstorming, I guess, and just greater minds.
Yeah.
Think alike.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Anybody else? These are all really good points.
Well, just sort of off the idea of like lighting, the cinematographer, sort of, for lack of a better word, assembling all the necessary parts of the set. Right, you got your lighting, costumes, all this, and the cinematographer looks at it and says, "Yep, we got what we need." But then you have the director maybe wants to go a different direction with it. That's not necessarily like, subjectively speaking, it might not be what the cinematographer thinks the project needs. And the cinematographer might be more experienced or just sees something in the project that's like, okay, I know what I'm doing here. And they might end up getting frustrated with the director who kind of keeps overriding them as like not taking their counsel, like properly and being like, well, no, I want to go this way with it. And so you end up with some strange moments and something that could have been good where the director just kind of is clearly going off their own. Or do you, like, it's kind of hard to glean that in certain films because I remember watching Wonder Woman 1984 and I'd watched the first one, and the first one, it was a little dark, but that's just the tint of DC films. They like to bring all the colors down. But overall, it was still cinematically speaking kind of cool to look at. It was, some good shots and everything. Good colors, like, okay, everything works here. And then when they got to 84, it was still the same director, I believe, but for some reason it felt different. It felt off as really like when I looked into it, it seemed to be the same. I believe it's Patty Hearst, if I remember correctly.
Jenkins.
Yeah, yeah. And I looked at it and I'm like, okay, why was the first movie kind of okay, and then this, were they trying too many things? Were they not listening to? Because when we talk about lighting, I just couldn't help but think of the scene in 1984 when Wonder Woman fights the other woman but it's like an entirely night scene. Both characters are in gray. There's no moonlight or anything. So it's just really hard to see any of what's going on. I'm like, did they not have any discussion with the cinematographer about this, or did they? And the cinematographer's like, "Yep, this is a good idea." It's like, where does it fall apart? Who do you look to as like captain of the ship when the ship is sinking? Yeah.
That's a lot to unpack, but I'm hearing at least two underlying concerns, and the first is changing something for the sake of changing it. That's a symptom of a younger, inexperienced director, and not necessarily somebody who's been doing it a while. Because after you've been doing this thing for a while and you've gone through the pain of production a number of times, and you've seen how your plans can get dashed or your hopes can get dashed, or you've seen how well things can work when you're really well prepared, you have a better sense, and you have a mature confidence going into the filmmaking problem, right? Any good director with reasonable experience is not going to make demonstrative changes on the day that would involve massive reallocation of resources, because they're keenly aware of how much time they have to make the movie, how expensive it is to change oars and midstream, and so they try to stick to the plan as best they can, knowing that ultimately it'll be okay if they've prepared correctly in pre-production. And then there are things that are unavoidable, like when it rains and you've got to go inside, you've got to do it. You can't sit out. Well, I mean, I suppose you could bring the writers in and thrash them into a trailer somewhere and say, rewrite this scene for rain, and I've seen that happen, But on the other hand, you prepare for it. You say, well, it's raining, so we can either be wet, or we built a set and we have it stashed away in the corner of one of the stages at Sony for just this purpose, and the only thing it's going to do is it's going to set us back a little bit of time to move the company from the beach back to Culver City, right? And then you shoot the other plan that you had. So it's the backup plan. That's preparation, right? You were also talking about the cinematographer being frustrated with what the director might want. That will speak to your relationship. It'll speak to your experience, and it'll speak to your relationship with the director. For instance, when I started shooting, I was really concerned with making sure that all my images were impeccable, right? They had to be the best image that I could render, given my current experience and tool sets and things I had available to me. And sometimes that can be frustrating for a director, because sometimes the director just wants a oneer, and I'm saying, oh, well, we can do this and this and this, and let's get it all because it'll be great, and then you can have the reverse of that. You can have the director who's behaving that way, and the cinematographer who says, but you know what, we could do it all if we just do this, and go zoop, like that. And so the relationship you have with that director is going to help you through moments like that. If you have to choose your relationships really carefully, if possible. In the beginning of your career, you're going to take whatever you can get because you got to work, right? But once you've gotten through that painful growth experience, and you start getting your choice of work, or you can say, well, I can do this show, or I can do that show, or I can wait 2 weeks and do that show with that director who I've worked with before, and we kind of have the same taste, the same visual style, that becomes really, really important. If you're having existential conflict with a director on a case by case or day by day basis, it's probably just a bad marriage. And you can do one of two things: you can quit, or you can just say, you know what, it's only 6 weeks. I can just give him whatever he wants and get out of it and move on to the next thing. I mean, it's really kind of a choice. It's a painful choice you have to make in retrospect. Hopefully you can head that off in pre-production by simply picking, the director that you feel you have the most in common with, in terms of your appreciation, your taste, your aesthetic, or pick the director that you think has the opposite of what you like and relies on the difference to make up the sum of all of the whole, right? And you're going to have to qualify the people that you work with a little bit. In the beginning, like I said, it's hard to turn down work because you need a job, and you have to do it. And sometimes as a professional, sometimes we do things that we would prefer not to do, but it's out of necessity. And then we wait for those moments when we have precisely what we want or what we need, and we enjoy that experience much more. But as you get on in your career, you may hopefully develop the luxury to where you can say, you know what, I don't want to work with any young directors. They just don't know enough at this point. I want to work with somebody who can teach me something that I still might want to learn about my own craft, and, always seek a higher level, right? Um, it's interesting because I'm working on a chapter in my own book right now. And it's all about, it's titled Punching Above Your Weight. The chapter is called Punching Above Your Weight. And the whole idea is, you want to work with people that will challenge you, that will raise your level of your own performance, show you something new, help you evolve, and not stagnate or stifle you. Because usually that means that somebody who has some growing to do before they reach, they become on par with where you're at personally. So if you're always punching above your weight, in other words, look for a situation that's a little bit of a challenge for you so that you'll grow into that and you'll get better as a result of it, and you'll move forward with more knowledge and better perspective. I think that's the relationship you want to look for, and you'll find fewer moments of conflict if you really respect the director you're working with, and you believe that the vision that they have in their head is doable and that you agree with. Look for those relationships, and that's really, really important. Don't just take anything that comes along, because you might get stuck with a real boob that just they don't get it, and then your life will be miserable. So unless you can reconcile the paycheck and just say, you know what, I don't really care, I'll do whatever they want for, in LA, the going rate's $5,000 a week for a cinematographer on a union film. So for $5,000 a week, I'll give them whatever the hell they want, or, you might get to a point where you're like, you know what, at my level of the game, if it's not going to look good, if I'm not going to produce work that my agent is going to be able to shop around for and get me work, or the audience is not going to want to pay to go see, then I don't want my name associated with it, and that'll be the mark of your transition in your own career.
Right. Because I mean, somebody could come to you and be like, "Hey, we're doing, insert big blockbuster IP here," but what they want to do with it, and they're like, "Oh, we'll pay you this absurd amount of money," but that might be the last film you ever make, because it comes out it comes out, everybody's like, "Well, who was this in a?" Because the audience won't care. The audience will be like, "Oh, who's the director?" Right. But then behind the scenes, the guys actually make the films in the industry, they'll be like, "Oh wait, this Rob was the cinematographer on this thing. Yeah, we don't want him for any other project, because he was in charge of the images. The images are bad, therefore that could mess up where you're going."
And that can happen, believe me, that can happen. It's the networking, it's the the competitiveness of the industry as a whole, that can certainly happen, for sure. I think it's always best to just be in a state of mind where you're enjoying your work and you're having fun doing it. And even if it's the fifth time you've done that kind of shot, maybe because you are the cinematographer and you do have this sort of broad language at your disposal, you can make little changes that are important to you, but that they don't affect the overall tone of what's happening. So they don't affect the director's, intentions at all. And they probably won't um, affect the actors in any way. But you'll look at it and you'll say, I'm really glad I moved that light, or I'm really glad I changed the gel on that to that other color, or I'm really glad I switched the camera CCT from warm to cool, or whatever it is. And learn to find those moments that you can exploit from your own knowledge base. That's what being in control of your skill sets is all about. So you can give yourself a little bit of that own comfort level by playing with your tools and making it work. But definitely work on your relationships so that you don't find yourself trying to please a master that's just not pleasable, because that can be a bit of a drudgery, for sure. Good stuff. Anybody else?
I was just going to say, while you were talking about the relationships between cinematographer and directors, I've noticed a lot of, just doing light research, a lot of directors, especially big names and who've been around, have the same cinematographers for multiple projects. Same thing with the Patty Jenkins, same cinematographer for both of the Wonder Woman movies. He also worked on Fantastic Four and Game of Thrones, but same cinematographer. The same cinematographer worked with Quentin Tarantino, has the same cinematographer for a lot of his projects after Kill Bill. Same cinematographer works with Steven Spielberg for a multitude of his films since Schindler's List and on and on and on. So definitely speaks to the point of having a good relationship with your director and director-cinematographer relationship and the comfortability there.
For sure, man, because it's a relationship, whether you think about it that way or not. It's like, if you're the cinematographer and you're working with the director, you're with this person for, a feature film can be anything from 18 days to 2 years, 3 years, right? Depending on who you're working with, right? And then it's like 12 to 15 hours a day. Imagine being around your significant other for that amount of time, and think about the things that will grate on that relationship over time. It's just basic human interaction, right? So, man, do you want to? That's why the industry's so clandestine. It's like, do you want to spend the next 42 days, 15 hours a day working with somebody who you wouldn't want to have a beer with after work? Or you wouldn't want to, or you couldn't spend a casual Saturday afternoon over coffee or go to lunch with?
Or somebody who, necessitates a beer after work every day.
Well, that's the other problem. But
yeah.
Can you imagine that? So this is why, you can, one cinematographer that I worked with early in my career, he referred to it as dating. And I think he was really right in that respect. It's like when you go on a job interview as a cinematographer and you meet with the producer and the director, if you guys haven't worked together before, it's a lot like speed dating. What do you like? What's your favorite color? What do you like to do on your days off? And blah, blah, blah. And you're getting a feel for these people on a personal level, because you have to work with this person for the next X amount of days and hours per day. It's really, really important. You can't just throw two diametrically opposed or philosophically opposed individuals into a room for that amount of time and not expect a bloodbath. I mean, it's just not, it's not realistic. So, within reason and without compromising your own virtue or your own creative inspiration, your passion, whatever, choose your relationships. And then in the beginning, try to be as light as you can, because it's all a learning experience for the first 5 years anyway. You're going to get hit with stuff you've never imagined or seen before, and just enjoy it. Learn as much as you can, be as helpful as you can, and understand that this too shall pass, and it's a growth experience. And as you grow and evolve, that you'll get better at managing the relationships, you'll get better at managing the expectations, you'll get better at your job, and then it'll go from you looking for work to work looking for you, right? They'll seek you out, because the things that you're doing will get seen. And when they get seen, people will say, hey, I saw that movie, and who shot that? Let's get that person for our next film, because man, I really loved the way it looked, and the blah blah and the thing and the whatever. And they come eventually to you. I mean, that's the perfect scenario, right? And then the only thing that throws a wrench in that works is the sheer amount of competition that you face, which is another reason why I said to you on Monday, do things that differentiate you from everyone else. So I'm looking right now at my everybody on this meeting. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 34 minus myself, so 33 names tiled on my screen right now. What makes Jack different from Caitlin, different from Aaron, different from Noah, different from Julian? Who are you people? Are you all the same? If you're all the same, then it doesn't matter which one of you I pick for my next movie. But I'm hoping that Julian's idea of what looks good and Christian's idea of what looks good are different. It makes my decision easier in a way, because one will be totally right for the story and one might not be. But it also encourages this sense of diversity, and I don't mean it in the socially acceptable context. I'm talking about everything can't be blue, man, because that gets boring after a while. We need all the colors, and we need to see them in different combinations, and how you combine them says a little bit about who you are, maybe either as a person or as a creator. And so that helps us understand who you are. And then it helps us, if I'm a writer or if I'm a director and I have a tone in mind from something that I've written that I want to get on film, I'm going to start looking in the landscape for that cinematographer whose images seem to understand or speak to that tone. And I'm going to pick that person for that story. I'm not going to pick the same guy every time necessarily, because the tone of my stories might change, and they might change drastically each time. And so you change out cinematographers like you would change out any other tool that is doing a job for you, right? Or it's the other thing, it's the comfort of the old shoe, right? No matter what you're doing, that shoe is so comfortable and it fits your foot so well, you're willing to put up with any minor shortcomings in that shoe to accommodate the activity that you're doing, because comfort is more important to you than performance, right? So you wear cleats if you're playing football, sneakers if you're playing basketball, rock climbing shoes if you're climbing a mountain. You wouldn't climb a mountain with cleats on. I mean, they'd have to be really comfortable cleats. Or you might be climbing an ice floe. In that case, the cleats might be totally fine, right? But the comfort is more important to you than anything else. And when you say Quentin Tarantino works with Bob Richardson all the time, or Steven Spielberg works with Janusz Kaminski all the time, part of that is the comfort of that relationship. They know each other really, really well. They trust each other and the choices that they're making. They have the same taste in color, the same taste in composition, the same taste in wardrobe. And so they're just super compatible in that way, you know? So that's part of the beauty of the industry is we've got, there's a couple of different ways that you can approach everything, but I think one of the things you want to be careful of is to stay personable in your interactions, and don't just be, for lack of a better word, the tool, right? Because, if we don't have the right tool, a lot of times we just grab the first thing in the box. And if it's a hammer, it's not always the right tool for the right job, right? But if you don't have, the right tool and you got to drive a nail, any hammer will do at that point. So be a little bit more, be careful of your relationships and nurture them. They're very, very important to you, as much as your camera or your lighting would be important to you. So to your relationships. Okay. Anybody else, or you want to move on with the PowerPoint or whatever that thing is, keynote?
I had a question.
Yeah.
What is it worth the risk moving over to LA for more job opportunities and whatnot?
How important is your career to you?
Very.
What do you want? So let's ask you the question, Clay. What's your idea of a cinematic image?
An image that tells a story without having to actually have words on the screen, so to speak.
Well, I mean, hopefully that's all of the cinematography, but I guess my point is, do you see yourself wanting to do sweeping epic cinematography that involves cranes and involves exotic locations and actors in extravagant makeup and costuming? Or are you cool with doing a really well lit, nicely composed interview for a documentary, right? If you have aspirations for your images that speak of scale, right? Get thee to LA as soon as possible, right? Because that's where you're going to see that en masse, right? If your idea of the career that you want for yourself is shooting really good looking interviews, you can do that almost anywhere. So the industry will be where you find it, and it'll be defined by what you want for yourself in terms of your body of work. I'm a big advocate of going to the mountain and climbing as high as you can climb and testing yourself and seeing where you can get, and shoot for the moon, because if you miss, you get everything in between, right? But I'm one of those who, and that's why I went to LA, and I waited. I mean, I worked the East Coast for the first 16 years of my career. and I was doing multi-million-dollar movies at that point, Too Fast and Too Furious, $117 million movie. And I'm like, yeah, but, okay, how old are you? Well, I'm 35 years old. Well, you better get your ass to LA now then, because you should have been there 15 years ago. Right. And so I'm like, okay, started looking around, and how many $117 million were they doing in Florida around the year 2000, 2002? Not many. The only two that happened, I lit both of them. That was it. All over. No more of that kind of work to do. So did I want to go back down to doing little stuff again and being happy doing that? There's such a thing as an adrenaline rush, right? And when you get a taste of that, you want more. It's really hard to have a roller coaster sort of career because you never develop a sense of momentum or cadence, right? You're constantly interrupted by, irregular activity or events or timing or whatever. So I'm like, okay, take a look around. There's not a whole lot of $100+ million movies going on. Where are they doing it? Let's see, New York or LA, right? Well, I've been in New York. I was born in New York, and I know what that costs and what that means. And that was a battle I wasn't ready to take on. But LA, on the other hand, I didn't know that much about LA. LA had always come to my side of the country to work. So I knew people from there, and I knew about it from there. And obviously you have this idea in your head of what it's like, because it's Hollywood is now part of our vocabulary. But I went, and I said, if I don't go, and I hit 40, I'll never go. And that would be a mistake, because I have a lot more career ahead of me to give and to learn. And what I don't want to do ever in my career is not try something, because I'm 55 now, right? When I'm 65 and it's truly all over for me, right? Am I going to look back on my career and have there be holes and unfulfilled dreams or unfulfilled aspirations? Or am I going to say, you know what? I shot for the summit and I gave it my best shot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I got wherever I got, right? And I'm proud of that. I feel good about it. I look back on my body of work and I say, yeah, it's good. Is it what I would do now? Maybe, maybe not, but I can see how I evolved. I can appreciate my choices I made when I made them at those times in my life. I think it still speaks affirmatively of my taste and my skill, and I'm okay with it. And that's what you really want at the end of all of this. And you think about your career. So some of the students that I have, I don't know that they're thinking about career in terms of their lifespan. When I say career, I'm talking about what are you going to do with your life's work, right? So maybe you know what you want that to be now, maybe you don't, right? And you can have more than one life, right? I think I'm on my third anyway. You can change and you can try new things, but in terms of your career and the scale of it and what you accomplish, you want to be proud of it and you want to be happy with it. So you have to start making those definitions for yourself. Figure out what you like and what you don't like. That's hopefully what I'm here to help you do. Figure out what you like, what you don't like, what you want to try. See if you can narrow it down a little bit so that you're not, overwhelmed with the sheer volume of choices that you have. But let's start qualifying it a little bit so we can get you in moving in the direction that's going to be best for you. And then when you're ready to go, it'll feel right, and it'll just, the path of least resistance, I think, is the one that you've chosen wisely. If if it's just an absolute dog show and a dog fight, everything that you try, maybe you're in the wrong line of work, or maybe you're just feeling the competition, because there's a lot of that too. But we want to get you on the right track. That's what we're doing.
Yes, sir.
Good stuff.
And to speak on what you were talking about earlier, the difference between, I guess, a videographer and a cinematographer is like, you can make this, like you said, with the example of the interview, with like good lighting and out of focus background kind of thing. That could be a videographer, but to produce like an epic, like cinematic visual, that's a whole nother step.
I think it is, and you can do a little bit of that either way you swing, right?
Right.
But when I speak of cinema, and you're going to see this in the coming weeks, I'm talking about a certain way of approaching the filmmaking problem, certain way that you support the camera. Do you move the camera? Do you not move the camera? When you move it, how do you move it? Do you light? How do you light? What do you use when you light? How do you expose the image? What's too bright? Can you tell me what a well exposed, well composed image is? What's the arrangement of elements within the frame? And is it too bright or too dark? And now you have to define the standard. How do you define too bright? How do you define too dark? Right? These are the areas that we want to explore and give you a sense of your own sense of right and wrong, appropriateness, right? And then you refine that as you go along and try things, experiment, try things.
And would you say that's more of like a gut feeling, or is that something that you can kind of almost do a copy paste like formula type situation?
It's both. It's both, right? But your gut instinct will only come with time. Well, maybe not. Some people have a really good sense of what's good inherently, right? But for most of us, it comes with experience. And the more experience you can give yourself, the better. So that when you're faced with a challenge, it may be reminiscent of something you've seen and done before. And then you can apply all of that learned wisdom to the problem at hand, right? That's the best use of experience, is to give you some kind of diving board with which to proceed with a problem, solving it, you know? And then some of us, there's some people that are just naturals, I personally was not a natural. I had a great affinity for filmmaking because of a lot of the things that you need to know about and know how to do relative to making a movie. But you have to learn, and that's pretty much, 99% of us have to learn what we're doing. So just trust the process, look for good mentors, and take it all in and be open and responsive.
Oh,
okay. Thank you. Good questions, everybody. I'm going to leave advice to getting into the industry for you guys to check out on your own, because it kind of touches on a lot of the stuff we've already been discussing here. And then you can see it's the same kind of film. Again, it's the Cook Optics interviewer goes and asks a bunch of cinematographers how they got into the business, right? Some of them are very colorful and the responses are, very interesting. And then others are what you might expect. So check it out at any rate. And just understand that there are so many ways to get into the film business that it's really hard for me to say, if you do this thing, you'll definitely get in and you'll get what you want. That's not always the case. And, you might be successful 8 times out of 10 predicting outcomes by doing things the way, traditionally the way they've always been done. And then there'll be that 20% of the time when randomness or the universe steps in and says, this time it'll be a little bit different. But that shouldn't preclude you from trying to learn best practices and learn how to standardize yourself to what the industry does so that you can integrate into it. The industry will not change to accommodate you. You must integrate into it. Therefore, you need to learn best practices of the industry and be fluent in those things so that it's less of a problem for them to bring you in and accept you, because you're already open and fully fluent in the way the industry likes to do things, right? And then you can develop your nuance once you're inside and you are accepted and you're working and you're moving around, okay? So Roger Deakins, for those of you who don't know, cinematographer, born in England, started his career as a documentary photographer, cinematographer for the BBC, and then emigrated to the United States, started working in Hollywood, and has found a home with the Coen brothers for the most part. Shot almost all of their movies. And then recently has found other directors like Denis Villeneuve, who he is also highly compatible with. And I have his reel right here that we can take a quick look at and see what you think of his images. This header is from the assassination of Jesse James. Pretty interesting film. But let's check out, see if you can see if you know any of these movies just on site. So I blew it. I should have stopped the video before the end credits so I could have asked you folks if you recognized any of these films. So you got the list, you got the rundown of what was there, what was depicted, right? And that's not as far as it goes either. I mean, his filmography list is pretty extensive.
The shot of the guy on the cart, I guess I don't know the technical term for it, the little rail cart, where it's like a big valley shot and he's like pumping and he's like going into the distance. I believe that was Oh Brother Where Art Thou, if I remember correctly. Because I only know that because my older brother was obsessed with it like years ago, and he would watch it minimum 2 times a week. He wasn't a very artistic person, but he just really liked the story and the setting, so he just like would watch it all the time. So
Well,
I know those
that's
things by
great.
heart.
That's great, right? It really resonated with him. What does your brother do?
He was a what was it? He was going to the military. Then he got a hernia, so they had to discharge him. And then he was a volunteer firefighter, working a couple of places. But he what was it? He was working for a hospice service, like the people that like actually transport people around. So
Mhm.
not like an ambulance, but like a just like but like got like 90-year-old guy or whatever. It's just like we had to take him to a doctor's appointment or something, you know. So stuff like that. That's what he would do. So yeah, he wasn't exactly the most artsy, sophisticated guy ever, but like I said, he just the setting and everything, and the actors he just really enjoyed. So he would watch that constantly, and then he would go watch Harold and Kumar. So it's a very interesting taste.
Well, let's think about it this way. Uh, art, let's talk about your definitions of art. What does art mean to you? And to be artistic, what does that mean? Because I can tell you, as a practitioner, art means certain things to me, right? It speaks to my workflow, it speaks to my style, it speaks to my tool set, right? But art is also in the eye of the beholder, right? And who is the beholder in this point? It's the audience, right? So you may not be a practitioner of art, but you can be certainly an avid consumer of said art. And both are important aspects of the relationship, right? It's we who create the art need the audience to appreciate or to criticize what we do. It gives us validation. It gives us a sense of who we are in terms of our expression. It informs us as the creatives on how to modify our style, how to improve our style, change it, or reinforce it, right? So we need guys like your brother as well who like what we do because it affirms our belief in what we have made, and we have offered it in our vulnerability. We have offered our work to the audience in hopes that they receive it well, and receive it the way that we intended them to receive it, and that their response is affirmative. It's what we expected or what we hoped for, and it gives us the courage and the confidence to try again, to do this thing again and go through this pain again, because making a movie is in some aspects pain. It's a painful experience because it's hard work. It's the hours are terrible. Sometimes the food's not so good. The relationships are strained. The weather is not agreeable. I mean, you name it, and it descends upon you in the process of making a movie. If not this one, certainly the next one. And over time, you will see a trend, right? So what drives us to go through this again and again and again? It's guys like your brother who say, I love that movie and I've seen it 50 times, because that makes you feel good, that the time you invested and the energy you put into it, and the choices that you made were the right ones, right? So that's a good thing. And hopefully it evolves over time as well, and so that relationship gets even better with your audience. But I wanted to look at Roger's stuff here on what I put on the LMS for you. So Sir Roger Alexander Deakins, now if you please. He is a member of the British Society of Cinematographers. He's also a member of the American Society of Cinematographers. Best known for his collaborations with the Coen brothers, although Sam Mendes, Denis Villeneuve, to name a few. He's in both societies, as I mentioned. And just as a sidebar, for the benefit of those of you who have been here, anybody figure out how many times Roger's been nominated for Academy Award?
Wasn't it 15?
Yep. And he's won twice now. So he's the Meryl Streep of the cinematography field, right? Been nominated a whole bunch of times for a body of work that spans 4 decades now, going on 5, and won it a couple of times, which is pretty good. That's pretty good. So that's Roger. He has a website. He's got a newly crafted podcast website, which I think is listed in his personal website here as a link. Yeah, the Roger Team Deakins podcast. So like every couple of weeks, he comes out with a new installment. He's got many of them up here already, talking with different people in the industry and interviewing them. His brother is involved with this project as well. So there's a lot of content on his website that you can go and look at. His reel is on his website, and stuff that he's doing, things that are upcoming. It's just good. Check in once in a while and see what this guy's up to. He's definitely he's a role model for a lot of students, as well as a lot of working cinematographers. There are a lot of DPs out there working today that would tell you without hesitation that, you know, Roger is a big influence in their own body of work. So good person to get to know. What else here? I showed you this already. So, okay, that's Roger Deakins. Now, the next guy I want to talk to you a little bit about is Emmanuel Lubetsky. Okay. So Roger's from England. El Chivo, as he's known in the industry, is from Mexico City. So, and he has enjoyed pretty prolific career in Mexico internationally, as well as in the United States. And he is a 3-time Academy Award winner, and he did it sequentially. So he did it one right after the other. So he did Gravity, won the Academy Award. Birdman won the Academy Award. The Revenant won the Academy Award. Bam, 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 3 years in a row. Okay. And that was something that hadn't been done since the early 20s or 30s, I think. So consecutive Academy Awards for him. And he came on the scene in this country with a movie. I think it was either The Motorcycle Diaries or Y Tu Mama Tambien, one of the two. And he works a lot with Alfonso Cuarón as an international filmmaker. And then, of course, Iñárritu, who he collaborated on with, I think it was Birdman and The Revenant, both of those. If you haven't seen his award-winning films, I certainly encourage you. I think everybody's probably seen Gravity by now. Birdman, though, is a little bit less known to people. If you have an opportunity, it stars Michael Keaton. And it's a little bit of a frame within a frame. It's about a guy that was in the film industry as a superhero actor. He is now ostensibly washed up, but he writes a script that was designed as a screenplay for a live performance on Broadway, and he's trying to produce a live show. And it's the comedy, the dark comedy trial and tribulations of that character. But it has a very dynamic style to it, very colorful, lots of camera movement. I think it's an amazing film. And that's kind of one of his earmark accomplishments was that film. He has an Instagram page, which is a very interesting exhibit of his personal work. It's loading a little slow for me, but here it comes. There we go. So it's his nickname is El Chivo, so it's Chivo Exposure, shortened up to however you want to pronounce that. But this is him. This is all his personal photographic expression, right? And what's interesting about Emmanuel is if you comment on any one of his websites, more often than not, he responds back. And we've had students at UCF who have been super excited about the fact that they commented on something and Emmanuel chirped back at them either on, Instagram or Twitter or something. And the idea that he's accessible is something that a lot of people find very charming about El Chivo, because usually when these folks reach the lofty heights of their careers like they have, um, they become very insular or hard to get a hold of. So at this point, both Roger and Emmanuel are fairly accessible people. In fact, Roger Deakins, for several years running, was the cinematographer in residence at UCLA. And he used to give regular talks on campus, and he was at, lots and lots of cocktail mixers that they had over there. And he's also very active. He lives in Los Angeles now, so he's very active at the ASC Clubhouse in North Hollywood, where they host a lot of open houses and Q&As with ASC DPs, and they do a lot of student outreach and stuff. So both of these guys are really accessible, really open to academic needs and academic uh, environment, and very talented. I mean, if you look at the images that this guy is creating, just the still images, it's not hard to understand why he's a multi Academy Award winning cinematographer. I mean, his sense of tone and scale and proportion, composition, I mean, definitely stands out amongst even other Instagram pages. Very, very talented guy. Very, very interesting individual. Let me get out of this page. Okay, look, my toolbar's in the way. Get back to El Chivo. So let's see. Let's look at his reel real quick. Whoops. There we go. like that, where the candle blows out at the end of that. That's really cool. Now, did you recognize any of those films? What did you see? Anybody?
I saw Ali, obviously Birdman, Gravity, um, Children of Men was on there.
Yeah. Revenant.
Revenant.
Yeah. I had a question actually. I've never had a proper. I've seen a lot of the clips, but I've haven't had time to do a proper sit down with Revenant. And I know obviously the ones with Leo in there, that's from Revenant. But am I right in assuming the one with all the what I assume are Native American guys like running away through the mud? That's also the
Yes,
film.
that is.
What?
Not necessarily. He also did The New World for Terrence Malick.
Right.
So it could have been that.
So I'm trying to figure out the context though, because I had to laugh like when I viewed it and just now because they're all running and I can't really tell what happens to the one guy. I don't know if he slips in the puddle or if he's supposed to have been shot in the back, but it doesn't. He just kind of like goes whoop and he falls down.
In The Revenant?
In the shot of all the guys running away through the mud and like on the horseback and stuff, and then there's the one guy with the shield and he's running and then he kind of falls back. He like
He was
he like slips. Yeah.
the story is he's it's based on the true life of an actual trapper in the 1800s.
Yeah.
And he was mauled by a bear and crawled out of the wilderness.
Right. No. Not Revenant. The other one, the group shot where it's dark and they're all like running through the mud.
Oh, that could have been
And
New World. That could have been
yeah,
Alex.
because I saw it and I can't for the life of me figure out. My brain can't connect the context because at first I'm like, oh, they're running, and then he gets hit and he falls. He falls, so it's like maybe they're running away from somebody and somebody shot him, but
Well, it's the
he
story
doesn't
of the
go
original.
forward.
It's the story of the original colonies in Virginia.
Right.
So
So that's
it's
what
the
I figured.
relationship of the colonists and the Native Americans, and the fact that they had skirmishes back and forth for those 3 or 4 years that they were here before they all sort of succumbed to starvation and disease. So it's the story of Miles Standish and Pocahontas and
Right.
you know, those characters, and it's Terrence Malick's sort of spectacle rendition of that whole romanticized relationship. So
Right.
and he's taking some liberties obviously because we don't have all of the accounts of what happened in those times, but we do know that there were aggressive confrontations back and forth, and that the colonists did give the Native Americans a pretty hard time about it when they arrived here. So
Yeah.
But what did you think of the reel as a whole, his body of work?
Oh, the reel, yeah. I thought it was interesting because I assume he put the reel together himself. Is it? I don't know if it's a demo reel by him or just of his work by someone who's like a fan, but
I think it was somebody else's interpretation.
Yeah. Well, it at least gives me an idea of it does what it's supposed to do because it does let me know his work and
Yeah, it's all his footage.
immediately I recognize somebody in the chat also said like the light is like a big thing for him. He's always got some kind of light. And my thing that I noticed is that he does not like stationary cameras at all in any way. Because even when there's a completely stationary shot, like in The Revenant, even when there's just the close up of Leo in that reel of his character just sitting there, he's not even moving. There's no movement. There's an inner movement to what the character is thinking, and the camera is still following that movement. It's the slightest, smallest camera motion ever, but he always has something going by not necessarily what the actor is doing, but what the action of the scene is doing. It's always moving. The camera's more of a witness than a tool. It's another character in and of itself, and I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
Because you don't see like a lot of filmmakers, they'll be like, okay, we got to get this, we got to put it on a track and make it. He's like, nah, screw it, we'll steady cam this, we'll just run along with it and just go. It just works.
His current style speaks a lot to the evolution of the cinematographer as a creative individual. because anybody familiar with El Chivo in the beginning of his career will tell you that he was very much a studio technician. When he got to the United States and he saw all of the tools and all of the influence he had at his disposal, he became what many of us call a flamethrower. And he was very much into the most amazing and over engineered architectural builds of lighting and sets and so forth. Some of the clips that you saw in his reel are from a movie called Lemony Snicket. It's a series of unfortunate events. And I can tell you that the lighting for a lot of those sets, even though it looks like it's exterior lighting, was actually done on stage or in controlled environments where it was lit with studio systems that were at that moment in time the largest contrived lighting arrangements that had ever been done for motion picture. And he depleted a lot of rental houses at that time of valuable equipment and assets for that one movie. And so for the folks who programmed the lighting dimmer systems, for instance, it was an absolute nightmare.
You just imagine being like somebody working on a film at the same time, and you go to like your sixth rental house that day looking for some specific type of lighting setup that only certain houses have, and you get there, it's like, all right, Dave, look, I just went to blah 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 blah, and they told me that Manuel took all their lights for this series of unfortunate whatevers he's working on. Do
Well,
you have them? It's like he's got ours too. It would be so annoying.
That definitely
Ugh.
happened in Hollywood. And to answer your question, no, I don't have to imagine that because it happened to me on Too Fast and Too Furious. So I personally exhausted 5 rental houses in South Florida of all of the remaining gear that was available to make that movie. The first unit came in with equipment from Los Angeles for their needs because Matt Leonetti, the DP, had specific equipment that belonged to him that he wanted to use, his paintbrushes and tools, basically. And then from there, we supplemented what he couldn't provide from the local rental houses using Cine Videotech as a broker, and then all of the surrounding rental houses after that. So once Matt Leonetti's what we call run of show package was established for him, and he had everything that he wanted on a day-to-day basis, then I went into Cine Videotech and sucked up every other available resource there was in Miami. And in some cases, we were, because Bad Boys 2 was finishing up when we started Too Fast and Too Furious. And so there was a certain amount of gear that was still out on Bad Boys 2 that was coming in at a trickle as that movie winded down. And then we started up Too Fast and Too Furious and just started gulping up all of the gear. And I literally had a crew of guys in the parking lot at Pascal Lighting in Fort Lauderdale manufacturing cable so that I could wire up and power up some of the sets that we had going in downtown Miami at the time. And that was only a fraction of what Emmanuel did to Los Angeles when he made Lemony Snicket. So it'll happen. It can happen. But getting back to Emmanuel, the interesting thing about his evolution is he went from being that guy to making movies like The Tree of Life and then The Revenant, where he was hard pressed to even use a tripod in most cases. And a lot of the stuff was handheld because of what you're talking about, that subjective camera point of view, that immersive feeling that he could get from holding the camera and then sticking a wide angle lens in your face and getting a close up of the actor from 6 or 8 inches away, and being in that space visually gives the audience a sense of standing right next to Leo, when he's sighting in the Indians coming across the river at him, or when he's looking at getting mauled by the bear, or any of the interesting shots that they had in that film. So Chivo has gone from being this massive monolithic builder of lighting and sets to handheld guy running around in the woods with a small crew and a couple of reflectors. But his expectation of the images and his level of creativity for the images, and his effectiveness of communicating visually has only gotten better. It has not gotten worse as a result of his change in approach to lighting and camera work, right? So he wasn't better when he had a lot of lights and a lot of camera gear. He was just as good, if not better, when he had only a few reflectors and a couple of lenses and a handheld camera, right? So he went from not a lot of experience and taking all the tools he could get his hands on and playing and experimenting and figuring out what he likes, what he doesn't like, what's true, what's false, to I only need this, this, and this. Let's go out in the middle of nowhere and make a movie, right? He's gone that extreme in the course of his understanding of his craft. So that is an extraordinary evolution to witness and to be able to go back and look at each of his films at each stage in his development and see, how was he lighting, how was he moving the camera, what was he doing, because you can definitely track it. It's really interesting. He's one of those individuals that you can definitely see the evolution in his body of work. And I encourage you to do so, absolutely, because it's a learning experience in and of itself. I could probably, every example I use in my cinematography classes, if I just sourced Chivo for the images and the background, I could do it, no problem. He's just that type of collaborator, that type of artist. Can you guys see my tile, or is that just me? I'm constantly trying to get it out of the way because I think it's in your way. I think that's just me, isn't it? Okay, let's get back to okay, so that's El Chivo. Christopher Doyle. And now keep in mind, folks, I'm showing you the rock stars, right? So there are lots of cinematographers out there that don't have the standing of, an Emmanuel Lubetsky or a Roger Deakins. There are cinematographers out there that are leading very humble and soft-spoken lives and careers, but that doesn't mean that their work is not equally compelling, right? So, and it's really hard to just show you 4 folks, right? To show you 4 cinematographers and say, these are great cinematographers. Because let's face it, if they're on the ASC active roster, which is a very exclusive club that you have to be invited to join, you can't just sign up. Anybody on that roster is going to deliver images that are impeccable, right? So to pick 4 is really, really a hard thing to do. So I'm showing you the rock stars, right? But there are guys out there that are doing amazing work, and you've seen their movies, but you probably don't know their name. Dan Loughton, for instance, or Carl Walter Lindenlaub, or there's so many to choose from. That their active roster is several hundred people by this time. So that's why I want you to do that paper, and I want you to throw a dart at a board, pick a name, and do a little research so you can see more than just the folks I'm offering you here, because you'll see some amazing stuff, I guarantee you. Christopher Doyle, though, is an interesting character. He's a lovable rogue, if you will. He is an Australian expatriate living in Hong Kong, and his career has been Chinese cinema predominantly for the past 30 years, although he has done a few things in the United States, but he has worked a lot with Wong Kar-wai over in Hong Kong, who is a big name in the Chinese cinema industry. And he has a very practical, pragmatic approach to making films. He can work in the studio system with all the tools and fancy bells and whistles and big crews. And he can also work like Chivo works now, with a camera and a few people out of the back of a pickup truck. So he's got a pretty broad palette as well. He has an Instagram page if you want to go check him out. This is Chris. He's a little bit of the lovable beer drinker. He's Australian, so he's gregarious, right? But I think that's part of his charm. He doesn't hesitate to drop F-bombs in an interview, which I also think is charming, because he's not worried about pretense, right? He is who he is. What you see is what you get, and if that works for you, then he's happy to work with you. And I think that's an interesting take. In fact, here's Anthony Bourdain chiming in on his Instagram page. The great cinematographer Christopher Doyle, who shot, among other things, In the Mood for Love and The Chungking Express, here's seen shooting the Hong Kong episode of Parts Unknown. That was one of his TV series. So here is Christopher Doyle, and I can show you his reel here.
This is the checkers game where grandson and granddad.
After this commercial. There we go.
Reading through excerpts from Christopher Doyle's diary that he writes while shooting a film seems like unbridled chaos. It's so chaotic that it fills me with feelings of cinematic dread and paranoia. In his diary, he describes how things are constantly changing and going against him. He fights weather elements while shooting exteriors, describes shooting a film without a script, with little direction of where it's headed, and talks about shooting a large-scale fight scene at a World Heritage Site that can't be damaged. It appears so chaotic sometimes that all you can do is laugh. So what is to be done? Fight it? No, embrace the chaos. In this edition of Cinematography Style, I'm going to be analyzing and breaking down the cinematography of Christopher Doyle by looking at his work and drawing from his philosophy on creating images, as well as looking at the gear he chooses for his photography. Australian-born Christopher Doyle left his native country at 18 and embarked on many different odd jobs before making his debut on the Taiwanese feature That Day on the Beach with director Edward Yang. He moved to Hong Kong, where he became known for working with Chinese directors such as Wong Kar-wai, Stan Lai, and Chen Kaig. He is probably best known for his work with Wong Kar-wai, shooting most of his features, such as Days of Being Wild, Ashes of Time, Chungking Express, Fallen Angels, Happy Together, and In the Mood for Love. Over the years, he has received many accolades for his diverse and lengthy filmography. So what does embracing chaos look like? Well, for Doyle, it seems to stem from his love for the story and the motion behind the story. His cinematography is not always concerned with realism. How his images make you feel is more important than the illusion of reality. He loves texture, and it shows in his work. The films he shoots, especially in Hong Kong, have a grittiness to them. He likes to use foreground elements and shoot through them, creating a dirty frame. The images don't try to be too clean or polished. In his diary that he wrote during the production of Hero, he described his disdain for lack of texture on the set. Those who build our sets and finesse the spaces see my work as separate and unrelated to theirs. Just a little dirt would make such a difference. In my Hong Kong-based world, I'd be at these walls and pillars with a couple of spray cans right away, but that isn't done here. His lighting approach also embraces a certain amount of chaos. Mixed sources are all over his work. In Fallen Angels, for example, the motivation of his light comes from everywhere. A tungsten street lamp outside diffused by frosted glass, an overhead dirty fluorescent, a practical clock on the wall emitting light, a TV, signage outside the room. It all adds to this beautifully gritty world of underground Hong Kong. He likes to light directly, often not bothering to diffuse or bounce light to soften it. This creates highlights and reflections in the skin and hard shadows. Movement of the camera is crucial in his work. He makes the astute observation that the camera should only move when someone or some idea motivates it to. Although he's famous for his handheld work, it's not his only trick. Doyle approaches each film differently and finds a way of moving the camera that works for the visual language of the film he's shooting. A lot of his movement is rough around the edges, but I think this is because a lot of the emotion in the films he works on are rough around the edges too. Translating 3 dimensions into 2 seems easier through the movement that is basic to any film. The most important thing is to keep trying as free-handedly as possible, rather than imposing it through some formal system. But on some films such as Hero, he favors a lot of still frames, an approach motivated by a more precise, considered story. The same can be said for how he frames his shots. Often his frames are canted, distorted, or angled in an unusual manner, but they can likewise be centered and traditionally composed, depending on what the emotion of the scene requires. Some DOPs like using the same gear. They become familiar with it and helps them achieve a coherent style. Doyle seems to, again, place more importance on how his choice of gear affects the story than on maintaining a continuity of cameras, lights, and grips equipment. Through his career, he shot on both film and digitally. He's used many different stocks, such as Fuji 250T, Agfa XT320, Kodak 320, 500, and 800 tungsten stocks, to name just a few. He does seem to favor shooting 35mm on tungsten stocks, perhaps for the increased sensitivity that they provide in capturing available light and sometimes dimmer mixed practical sources over the lower speeds of daylight stocks. Like his stocks, he also mixes his use of lenses. Some films he shoots with super wide focal lengths, and for some he prefers a more compressed telephoto look. He uses lenses from Cooke, Zeiss, Angenieux, and others, and sometimes pulls out odd lenses such as the fisheye 6.5mm, which is probably a nickel, that they use to achieve the distorted look on fallen angels. Doyle often shoots spherical over using anamorphic glass. He shot on film cameras such as the Arriflex 535, 435, and BL4, and digital cameras such as the Arri Alexa, Red, and even the Sony FS7. Cameras like the 535 allow him to do ramping with the frame rate, which is changing the frame rate while shooting. He also uses these cameras to shoot in a style that he became synonymous with, especially in his work with Wong Kar-wai. To achieve this effect, he would shoot at a low frame rate, such as 6 or 8 frames a second instead of the usual cinematic 24, and the frames would then be step printed, which means frames would be repeated multiple times to get to the required 24 frames a second. This effect slows down time and provides a textured, chaotic look that Wong Kar-wai films have become famous for. Doyle loves shooting handheld, but also likes to shoot off a dolly often. Using a fluid head as opposed to a gear head gives the movement of the shots a slightly rougher feel, like the camera is being operated by a human and not a robot. He has also used cranes and Steadicam when necessary. With such a chaotic approach at times, it seems that Doyle has no singular style. However, I think that's just what his style is, a chaotic and emotional style. Not following a traditional film school or camera assisting path in becoming a cinematographer, he is not bound by cinematic tradition and expectations. Art is what artists make. Good imagery is a lifetime practice, not a technical ability or something appropriated from the film of the day. His unique approach to capturing stories, I think, is part of what makes his cinematography so engaging. His images may not always be perfect, but neither is life or the human emotions that the stories he shoots embody.
The touch and the power that mocks God.
We're being attacked, blocked up, and thrown.
Okay. So, you may have seen some of Chris's work in that brief presentation. I don't know if you guys recognize Hero. That was one of the more westernized films that he did. one of my favorite films. The color and the spectacle of some of the shots, big, sweeping, epic frames and compositions are equally in his repertoire with the gritty down in the dirt kind of cinematography that he's done for other films. But what about the takeaways? Because that was an interesting video essay done by uh, uh, cinematic. Oh gosh, I forget that guy's name. He changed his name on his website. But what did you think of the essay itself and in describing Christopher's work? Did you feel that it was accurate in its discussion?
I would say yeah. It.
You would not say, or you would say?
No, no, I would say I would say yeah. It definitely like breaks down everything that it's presenting, and with all the examples, it's easy to see. Okay, like for instance, when he quoted about Hero, he was quoting Christopher about oh okay a little bit of dirt here would have been good, and then showing the contrast between how Hero looked and then immediately the next one, which I assume was Fallen Angels, I think was the next clip where he showed the woman cleaning in the room and had the big clock that she was winding, and how you could tell the difference between those two films because one you could tell there was some grit, some dirt, some texture. Then you look back at Hero and it's like, well, yeah, Hero is pretty. There's nothing wrong with it. It looks good. It's just not. You don't feel real. It feels like the epic play that it was meant to portray.
Yeah,
And it's kind
that's
of interesting because it came out at just a year. It came out a year before Last Samurai, which is sort of a similar theme, but Last Samurai threw some dirt on it, where they were like, okay, what if we do this theme of a feudal era, but then also we're gonna make it a little grittier, a little darker. There's mud, there's blood, there's imperfections. Whereas Hero was distinctly because of the type of story it was, it couldn't really have those imperfections. Now, I'm sure if Christopher was in charge of the story, he probably would have been like, no, we can throw some dirt on this, but you know, depending on what the film needed to convey.
Yeah,
And I think
let's focus on that for a second. So we're talking about your images being appropriate for your story, right? So in The Last Samurai, so we're talking about the Tom Cruise the film now.
Yeah.
That has a historical context to it that Hero does not have. So Hero is a legend. It's not a reenactment. It's not even based on anything that was remotely real, other than the fact that there were Chinese emperors and it was how life was in feudal China and in its early history. But it's, in terms of the story, it's all metaphorical. So the fact that it has an unreal quality to it or a surreal quality to it is precisely the intention there. Like the way the swordsmen when they're dueling and they're doing a dance. It's a choreographed representation, a symbolic representation of the parable that they are trying to tell you with this feature presentation. And on the other hand, Tom Cruise is showing us a more historical representation of that relationship and that period of time, which demands a little bit more grittiness and a little bit more realism. So it is speaking to the appropriateness of the images at that point. So he could have shot that like he shot Chungking Express, but then the movie would not have, I think, would not have had the same presence. It wouldn't. I wouldn't. I don't think it would have the same appeal necessarily that it did. And you also have to take into context the times that a movie or film was released to the public, because a lot of times that has a great deal to do with the way a film is going to look and present itself to the audience. The filmmakers are going to rely heavily on the public sphere and the zeitgeist, if you will. In other words, where is the public sphere at that time? What are they thinking about? What are they talking about? What is the tone of society at the time? Has a lot to do with how a movie is produced and how it's presented. So we might even now enjoy a more grittier version of Hero if it were made now as opposed to 15 years ago. But at the time that it was produced, it was coming rapidly on the heels of, for instance, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Or there was another one that came out of China at the time, The House of Flying Daggers. All of those movies had that metaphorical, choreographed, otherworldly, surreal aspect about them, because that was what the Chinese film industry was doing at that point in time, and it just happened to translate well in this country. It was different, it was fresh, it was something we hadn't seen before, and so it did well on our shores. But the Chinese, that was what they thought good movies with a lot of money would do if they had all the tools and all of the bells and whistles at their disposal.
Right.
So their movies
And
reflected that at the time.
yeah, an example of it sort of evolving, like you said, and changing with what people are expecting. I think a good example would be The Great Wall with Matt Damon, where
Let's not go there.
well, it's just an interesting movie because it released in China, obviously, and it did fairly well over there. But then when it came over here, although it looked good, it had a big name actor, right? You had Matt Damon, you had action, you had pretty much everything you would think a Western audience would appreciate. And really nobody went to see it. It didn't do very well, even though it was a pretty okay, film as the big fanfare battle films tend to go. And it's like, well, why did it do good here, not here? And one of the contributing factors was probably the dramatization of the historical landmark, which was the wall. It's like because over here we don't really think about the Great Wall of China. We think, okay, it's a wall. Whereas over there, they're like, this is the thing we have, and so it's part of their culture. Whereas over here, we tend to the reason we have a lot of more was the word, a lot of more like military movies over here is war is part of our culture. So we like 1917, right? Films like that. We like that because we that's part of what we do.
You've hit on the essence of the point, which is the cultural relativity of these two films, right? Or of these two audiences, I should say. What you have in Great Wall is, despite recruiting a well-known American actor to portray the leading role as the one white guy amongst a bunch of Chinese guys, fighting a monster on the other side of the Great Wall. What you had was China's response to the American spectacle superhero movie, basically. And they were trying it on. They were trying on the big, epic, splashy, glossy looking action film. And they were doing it in response to their cultural mores and folkways instead of ours. And so, they were copying our big budget spectacle style, but they were infusing it with their cultural concerns, and therefore it didn't translate so well. But it was part of a cultural exchange that we had going on with China at the time as far as cinema. I forget what year Great Wall came out, but I'm pretty sure it was after I visited Beijing in 2010, I think it was. I went to Beijing as a technical representative for a lighting company in Los Angeles called Cinemills. And I visited manufacturing facilities, and I visited a lot of local manufacturing. And then I visited a lot of their cultural landmarks and stuff. For instance, I went to the Great Wall and saw that in person with my translator and my liaison. And it was an exchange of ideas. It was their opportunity to kind of show off and show what they were doing with their film industry at the time, which was they were gearing up. So for the first time in their history, the government was infusing the film industry with a lot of investment. So I went to a place called China Film Group, which was about an hour and a half outside of Beijing. And it was their equivalent, I would say, of like Universal Studios without the theme park. Okay, it was a 5-star hotel. It was huge rental facilities with warehouses full of equipment and sound stages, and everything was relatively new. And the production was large scope, and it was in full swing. And they were very proud to showcase that. And they made a great point of parading me through there, and not only saying, here's the American visiting and seeing what we're capable of, but we're getting his validation and we're getting his input. And we are, we're blurring the lines between East and West. They wanted Chinese Hollywood to have the same standing and efficacy as Hollywood, because it was very much in part of their national pride at that point. The government was fully behind it and throwing massive amounts of money at it, and it was their push at that moment in time. And so then you're getting movies like that coming out that they fully intended to have release outside of the Chinese audience, outside of their market of consumption, which is very large, I might add. They have, at the time, they had over 1,000 broadcasters in China. That means 1,000 television stations, which is a lot bigger than ours. And all of it was Chinese content. So they were trying to get some new blood in there, so to speak. They were trying to get some international DNA into their footprint so that their movies would be more broadly appealing, and their own people would have a sense of their own comparative greatness to the things that they were seeing as import. When the American films come into any country, pretty much it's used as a benchmark for their own domestic product. The filmmakers in France, for instance, were huge consumers of American films at a certain point in time, and in England the same way, and in lots of countries around the world, they consume our television products like crazy, good or bad. I mean, Knight Rider is #1 in Berlin. Why? I have no idea, but they really love it, and so it was important for them to have our approval and to have our respect and recognition for what they were doing. And so they were trying to make their movies look a lot like ours. But I think that sentiment has calmed down a little bit in recent years. And now they have a sense of their own purpose and direction, and they don't need to sort of copy us as closely as they did. Does anybody else have any thoughts about Christopher Doyle's reel? Anything in there you like? Anything you don't like? Thoughts or questions on Chris Doyle? He's a little less known, but like I said, I love him. I think his work is terrific, and he gives a great interview. If you get a chance to catch something with him on YouTube, for instance, I encourage you to do that. He's a very colorful guy. You won't be disappointed. So that brings me to my last example, which is Seamus McGarvey. Okay, so I think you can gather from the name that he is Irish. He is responsible for one of my favorite movies as far as the cinematography goes. He is a member of the ASC. He's also a member of the BSC, if I'm not mistaken. And he has a lot of credits to his resume. Several Academy Award nominations. He is one of the manufacturers of what is one of the longest Steadicam shots in cinematic history, and that is the Dunkirk beach scene in the movie Atonement. I'm pretty sure there's segments of it in his reel. The whole scene is over 7 minutes long, and I won't show it to you here, but I encourage you to look it up on YouTube. It's phenomenal, and it's a testament to the Steadicam operator, because it is an amazing piece of Steadicam operating, to say the least. But let me show you really quick. Seamus has a series of tutorial articles on ASC magazine. He also has a lot of He does a lot of workshops and stuff. So Seamus doesn't really have a website like Deakins has or like Emmanuel Lebetsky has, but there's going to be a lot of videos on YouTube you can check out with Seamus featured as the instructor or the lecturer, and he's teaching you about something. But let me show you his YouTube reel, and you can see what you think of Seamus.
Do you have any samples of a really improvised solution in your career? But something, okay, oops, let's just do it.
Yeah, and I love being prepared. I don't like being so prepared that you're fixed, you're in a straitjacket creatively. You know, Joe, for instance, does really storyboard every single shot in his movies, Joe Wright. But, you know, there are times when he kind of jumps out of that and sees stuff. I mean, we did that a few times when we had to on Atonement because we were shooting in a stately home in the middle of the summer, but where it was supposed to be all in the first part of the film takes place one day, and it's the hottest day of the year. It's sunny, sunny, sunny. But every time you see an interior in that film, it was lit because it was pouring rain, because you know what British summers are like. It's raining all the time. So when we got sporadic sunlight, we would suddenly go, okay, we're dashing outside and pull the lights around the back of the house. And we would shoot stuff with the most amazing sort of post-storm clouds, but with sunlight in the foreground. And it was unplanned, but our crew was so small and so athletic that we were able to do that very quickly. We were able to go, okay, pull that HMI around the back of the house, and away we go. And we did that for some of the really loveliest shots, I think, of the film, you know, particularly Bryony, the young girl played by Saoirse Ronan, you know, just having those moments of imagination with kind of like motes of dust in the atmosphere and, you know, the last, like low light sort of breaking through it. Those things were kind of like, okay, we don't even need the whole crew. Just take that bounce board, we'll put the camera on the legs and we'll run down into the field and shoot it through the long lens through the field. We did lots of that, and we got some of the best shots that way.
How do you prepare film to be able to see improvisation opportunities? What's your first step?
Well, the first step is to read the script.
No doubt.
Yeah, and some people don't, actually. It's amazing. Or some people read it out of order or read it specific to what they want to shoot or what's coming up first. You have to read the script and read it with the story in mind. Read it as a book. You must read it in one go so that you can see the flow of images and think what will follow another image, because you won't see that sequence of images unless you think of it as a sequence. It's just, broadly speaking, what are the thematic, photographic and cinematographic things going on here? You know, don't say, hey, let's use the red or let's use the Alexa. Forget about anything technically at the start. Just don't even think about, oh, there's going to be a macro shot there, or there's going to be, or let's use that filter. Or just think about the thematic overview.
Short and sweet. So there you have it. And I think part of the reason why it's a short interview is they're trying to, you know, work within that sort of YouTube model of, you know, 5 to 7 minute content, you know, and also because Seamus does so much lecturing and stuff, it's kind of his stock and trade. So, you know, in an effort to not exploit his good nature by, you know, having him give a lengthy interview, they just ask him a few key questions and he talks about what, you know, what is most important to him in his work process. So has anybody not seen the film Atonement at this point? No. I recommend it. It's a drama. It's a period piece. It is it has a decidedly British overtone because it's, you know, it's about you know, the World War from the point of view of the British cultural suffering and endurance and what the war effort meant to them. it's also a love story. It's also a little bit of a crime drama. And then it's, to risk being a little bit of a spoiler, it's a bit of a tragedy. So it has a lot of those dramatic elements. But then the cinematography, I think, is very luxurious. And like I said, there is the beach scene at Dunkirk, which, if you saw the Nolan film, you know what that story is. Okay. 200,000 British troops stranded on the beach in um, not Normandy, but in the north of France, and the Germans are bearing down on them, and it's going to be shooting fish in a barrel. The English Navy is not in a position to lend a hand, and so the merchant marine from the southern shores of Great Britain venture across the channel, pick up as many of the servicemen as they can, and transport them back to England to live and fight another day. So it's a pretty dramatic part of the story. It's the culmination of the story in Atonement. And there's an epic Steadicam shot in that sequence that is just, if you've been a camera assistant, you'll feel for this poor guy. If you've ever strapped on a Steadicam, you'll definitely feel for the sacrifice that cameraman made for that shot. And I encourage you to check it out. It's pretty neat. It's, like I said, I think it's right around 7 minutes total running time. And I know that they rehearsed it. I think they said they rehearsed it 3 times, and they got 3 full takes in the can. And on the 4th take, the Steadicam operator collapsed. So that was just, a testament to how grueling that shot was, and the sacrifice that was made for that shot. And as a result, they keep it as a oneer. I don't think it's cut at all in the middle anywhere.
Did that guy get like a bonus or like a fruit basket or something? Like, hey,
well,
Dave, we know we sent it to the hospital on one of these days, but
he gets the bragging rights, doesn't he? For sure. I mean, I would recommend checking it out. I might have put it in your web courses video page. If I didn't, I apologize for that. But if you look for Dunkirk Atonement Steadicam on YouTube, you'll find it. It's there, and check it out. It's pretty amazing. So these are 4 guys that I think very highly of in the industry. Like I said, they're not the only ones by far. I mean, there's so many other people I could put up here, but the class would be 9 hours long, and I mean, part of what I want you guys to do is explore these individuals on your own and see what you find, and allow yourself to be amazed by what some of these folks are doing, and maybe find a favorite if you don't already have a sense of a favorite cinematographer. Or you could gear your search criteria around your favorite films, and then see if go to IMDb and find out who the cinematographer was for your favorite film if you don't know already, and then take that name and see if he's on the list at the ASC. If that individual's name is not on the ASC roster, and you feel very strongly about it, send me an email and let me know who that individual is. And I will give you the thumbs up or the thumbs down to use him or her as an essay subject, okay, for your cinematographer's spotlight paper, okay? I think I've already had one individual mentioned who wasn't on the ASC list, and I gave the approval emphatically because it was a good idea. Not everybody is a member of the ASC. That's the American Society of Cinematographers. And of course, every advanced nation in the world has a cinematography guild of their own, so you may have a favorite who is not a member of the ASC, but equally deserving of a research paper. So if that's the case, shoot me an email and let me know, and we'll talk about it. Let me hop back over to the modules really quick and see if there's anything I want to point out to you here. Blah, 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 blah. So just to reiterate, your reading assignment is out of the textbook. Have you all found a source for the textbook? Are you either going to rent it or purchase it or borrow it or buy it, whatever you want to do? Because you got to read the first chapter already out of the Hosier book. Okay. And then chapter 2A, which is, I think that's going to start digging into what the camera assistants are doing and what the different positions are in the camera department. So we've talked about who the cinematographer is, and we've talked a bit about what their mission is in terms of image creation. And now I want to talk to you in the scope of the camera department as a whole, because the cinematographer is the figurehead of the camera department. But the camera department on a major feature film consists of a number of individuals, and each one of their roles is specifically refined to get a certain portion of the work expectation done by the department. So I want to talk to you about that next time we meet and give you some examples and show you some stuff along those lines. And then I want to again reiterate that you have the C-Spot, I call it, Cinematography Spotlight paper that will be due next Sunday, I think it is. Where is it? I don't see it on my page. You guys will see it at your studio.
Yeah, I believe it's Monday, actually, the 5th.
Yeah, that's right. Monday the 5th at midnight, probably. Yeah. So there's a PDF you can download. This is the instructions. This is what they look like, but you can download the actual document to get a closer look at it. Okay. And there's also, I've given you a link to the cinematographer directory, I call it, which is it's an old roster. If you go to downloadable PDFs, I put the current ASC roster in your PDFs page. And then I also gave you a little primer on the UCF research documentation guidelines. So you're going to give me a paper and you're going to do it like an actual paper, even though it's only 2 to 3 pages. Give me a top sheet with your name, this class number, the individual that you're speaking about. Give me a bibliography. Okay. I want to see at least 3 research sources. So some people just give me YouTube and that's it. That's not enough. Okay. So find an article, find a YouTube interview, and find a website, and give me that kind of mixture of sources for your research, because it'll give you a more complete and accurate view or image of the individual you're doing research on. Okay. And then tell me a little bit about what they're doing. Okay. Give me some information about them personally. Where were they born? Where did they grow up? Where do their influences come from? What kind of work are they doing? Feature work, documentary work, television work? Do they use any special gear? Do they have any special preferences? Like, do they love to use Steadicam, or are they handheld all the time? Or do they have an interesting way of moving the camera? Do they have an interesting way of lighting? Right? Do they like monochrome? Are they very colorful, saturated? Are they desaturated? Give me some sense of what they're doing that you found interesting, that you want to offer as a discussion. And then give me an introduction and 2 or 3 pages of good research, and then a bibliography. Okay. And that shouldn't be too difficult. I'm not going to now understand that my letters are in professional writing and content for entertainment. So I am interested in reading well constructed text. So don't give me a lot of F-bombs and a lot of street talk and a lot of, stuff like that. I want you to write a grown-up paper. And the reason I'm asking you to do this is not just because it's not a Gordon Rule thing, and it's not, I just have a hard on for writing essays because I have 2 degrees in professional writing. That's not it. What it is you as a film person, and particularly as a cinematographer, are going to be responsible to your peers, like directors and production designers. you are going to have to be able to articulate your ideas to people. Okay. We work in a manufacturing industry where the images are the result of our effort. They don't come prior to our getting on the job. We make the images. So until they are dedicated to a media piece of media, like a strip of film or a memory card or a hard drive, it's an image in our own brains, and we are not mind readers, right? So if the director says, my vision for this movie is blah, 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 you have to be able to create or reproduce that image in your own brain from the input that you're getting from that director, right? So hopefully that director can articulate those ideas. So this is an exercise in communication more than it is an exercise in writing craft. Okay, but I want you to use writing craft well, because it reflects well on you as a professional if you can write well. Okay, so put a little effort into that, proofread it. Here's a really good way for you to determine whether or not your paper is effective. Have somebody read it back to you. If they can't read it without stumbling through your word craft, edit, refine it. If you can't read it and understand what you're talking about, probably there's not enough substance there in the content. Okay, but proofreading is a really good way for you to, before you turn in the paper, to make sure that you're getting your point across. Okay, I can't tell you how many times I've been asked to do this kind of thing in pre-production for a feature film. How would you approach, for instance, here's somebody, a real question. How would you approach lighting when the story reflects flashback sequences and current timeline sequences in a movie in context between two different characters? What? Wow. Okay. Now I have to interpret that directive, and then I have to tell you, instructively tell you, how I would represent Minnie Driver's past reflections, Minnie Driver's current state of emotional, her emotional situation, Jeremy Renner's past, Jeremy Renner's current emotional state. And they look different, and they're lit differently, and they have different color palettes. Okay. And I have to explain that. And that was tough. But when you've done it, and if you've done it enough times, it gives everybody a very clear idea of what your sense of the job is, what they want or what they expect from you. And there's no ambiguity. There's really good communication going back and forth. And that's a really productive relationship, because then everybody knows what's going on and what's on the table and what's expected of you, right? So this is really why I want you to do this paper for me. I want you to get into the habit of being accountable for your mind's eye. Tell me how you see it. Show me somebody who sees it the way you do, or somebody that you like, and explain to me why. I like Emmanuel Lubezki because his images are amazing. Define amazing. What is amazing about it? It's amazing because I get a sense that his camera is, as Robert put it, another character in the dialogue. I feel as though I am part of the conversation because the lens did this. That is defining amazing. To tell me it's amazing does not give me any information that I could turn around and use. I can't interpret amazing because Clayton's idea of amazing is different from Kim's idea of amazing. Okay. So you define it. Tell me what it is. Okay. This is really important. Remember, cinematography is a language, right? So all you're doing is translating one language into another. Images in your mind to text on a page. That's what a script is in reverse. We are reverse engineering the writer's vision through the director's translation with our cameras. Okay. So it's all literacy and it's all expression. Okay. So I think I should let you guys go. I've flogged you enough, and I don't want to abuse your time, and I want you to feel good about our conversations and want to come back. So let's table the presentation, and then I'll just ask you guys any thoughts, questions, observations, or concerns.
I have a question. Oh, sorry, you can go
No,
first.
go ahead.
Do you have like a movie recommendation for the week? You know, like, oh, check out this movie, not like for homework, but just like, you know, a movie.
I say a good place to start would be any of the films you saw snippets of in any of the reels that I showed you. So what are we talking about? From Roger Deakins, it's Sicario, it's Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, it's Skyfall, it's the assassination of Jesse James. From Emmanuel Lubetsky, it's going to be Gravity, Birdman, The Revenant, The New World, Tree of Life. If it's Christopher Doyle, definitely look at Chungking Express, look at In the Mood for Love, and look at Hero. And then in terms of Seamus McGarvey, my favorite is Atonement. Unfortunately, I can't tell you a whole bunch of things off the top of my head that McGarvey has done. I'm a little burnt out from talking for 3 hours, but Atonement is very high on my list of cinematic achievement. I would definitely check him out for that. And if that, doesn't work for you, I don't know, shoot me an email, give me a little opportunity to think about it. And, or what you can do if you want to score some brownie points is go to my IMDb and look at some of the stuff that I've worked on.
Okay,
check that out.
okay.
Okay. And here's why. It's not just brownie points. That's a really good, actually, that's a good teachable question here. You should know who you're dealing with, right?
Mhm.
If you haven't looked at my IMDb yet, how do you know that I'm not BSing you? How do you know that I'm not just pulling these presentations out of my posterior and blowing sunshine up your butt? You don't know that until you look at my body of work. And hopefully you'll get a sense that I know what I'm talking about by looking at things that I've lit or shot. My shooting resume is not so much on my IMDb because it's a lot of commercials and industrials that don't appear on IMDb. But there is 28 years of cinematic lighting on my IMDb resume. And if you can't figure out that I know what I'm talking about from that, you can fire me. Okay, so you could do that. And I firmly believe that. Anytime I've ever signed up to do a movie, the first thing I do, if I don't know the director, I research that director. And if I'm doing lighting for the cinematographer, I'm going to research that cinematographer. I want to know what these folks have done. I want to know what their tastes are, what their style is. I want to know if I agree with it, if I'm going to be a good fit for that team. So you guys should do the same thing to me. Vet me. Okay. Go on my IMDb and watch something that I lit and tell me if I know what I'm doing or not. Okay. Because that's important. You're going to have to do that for yourselves when you get out into the industry. Never take anybody at face value, because let's face it, you could lie on a resume. It's easy. And unless you want to take the time to research it and verify, you could be, hornswoggled. So I would do that. And then beyond that list, I don't know, shoot me an email and we can talk about it some more.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Anybody else? Anything?
I had one about the essay. For some of the research, are we allowed to use Wikipedia for doing research and stuff and using that in the bibliography?
Yeah, I don't mind. If you were doing a real research paper for a writing class, they wouldn't want you to do that. But for what we're doing, you can. And the easiest thing to do, if you're going to use a Wikipedia reference, is to just go to the bottom of the page where all of their references are, and you can go to the source material and see if there's anything else in the source material that maybe they left out of the Wikipedia article, and then quote the source media directly.
That's genius. Thank you.
Cool. I'm glad to be of help in some capacity. Anybody else? Anything?
I actually had two things. Real quick.
Yes.
So one related to assignments.
Mhm.
So going forward, the structure for each week is going to be two sections like per that week. So next week it's going to be 1.3 and 1.4, and then after that
Correct.
it's going to be 1. Okay, I'm just trying to make sure because like today I saw the video lecture in 1.2, and I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to go too far into the reading or whatever until the lecture because he might tell us something in there that informs the reading more. So just know that like going forward, Monday. So basically, Monday is going to be like have 1.3 finished, and then before Wednesday have 1.4 finished, so that I have the proper context going into the lecture.
In a perfect world, that would be how you would
Yeah.
handle it. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Okay.
And just
And
understand that the reading assignments, like sometimes the reading might be 50 pages, right?
right.
Do I want you to close read 50 pages? No, I don't know. I don't know if you're prepared to do that. So you should be able to read, to go skim the reading and look for the salient points, right?
Right.
And then compare that to the lecture. And if you still have something tugging at you, go back and do a deeper dive into the reading. That's what it's for, right? So you know about how to sort out topic sentences, right? And how to fast read something so that you're not reading every word.
Right.
The first line in every paragraph is generally the salient point in that paragraph, and the rest of it is supporting details or premise, right?
Right.
So take the reading in the same spirit, right? Don't close read it unless you really need the fine detail on a particular point, and then by all means, okay? So you don't get bogged down in the reading and stuff, because I know in 6 weeks it's a lot of reading.
Right. Um, and the other thing I had was from the beginning of class when we were talking about, who is the cinematographer and how their relationship to the director and how they work together, um, and how the audience receives certain credits, right? And so everybody knows who the director is, everybody knows who the actors is, but the cinematographer, who can be argued does most of the work of getting the director's vision out there. Um, my question is, why is it that the cinematographer and doesn't really get as a ton of credit compared to somebody like the director? Does that have to do with like auteur theory? Does that have to come
Does.
back to that?
It
Yeah.
absolutely does. And that's a loaded question that we could spend a lot of time on. The authorship movement, particularly in the American Renaissance, so 60s and 70s, let's say, is where it started, the seeds of that absurdity, okay, is giving the director credit for everything. Well, I don't know anybody who's good at all of it at the same time. And I don't know anybody who can keep that many plates spinning in the air at the same time. The thing about filmmaking is you must have a team around you, because there's too much to manage for one individual, okay? And the smartest people are the ones who collaborate by surrounding themselves with people that are very good at the thing that fires them up, right? So like I've said, I know how to edit, but I would never take a job as an editor. It's not my thing. Do I want to sit with content for 8 hours a day on a monitor and a screen and chop that thing together, trying to figure out what the writer was trying to say in the best way possible with the images I have at my disposal? Nah, I'd rather shoot the images and think about the edit while I'm creating those images, and challenge myself to communicate visually what the script is saying, and give that content to the editor, and have the editor then take what I've done and hammer it into a movie, right? Or sound. That's one of my favorite picadillos, is sound. In the modern digital age, so many times if you're doing like industrial work and stuff, the client will say, well, we'll hire you as a cinematographer, and then you can do the sound and the editing too, right? Nah, not really. If you have the budget for it, we should hire a sound person to come with their own sound equipment and a boom operator and maybe a utility, and they can focus solely on location sound capture and maybe the post-production sound treatment, so that I, as the image creator, can focus exclusively on exposure, composition, and camera movement. And then we can work together as a team, right? And I certainly don't want to chop it, as I've already explained to you before, right? So, but sometimes you have to do that. So, but yeah, it was auteur theory that kind of put the idea in everybody's head that the director was the only person that could be credited with the look of the film. They call that person a director for a reason. They are not doing all the work themselves with direct effect, input, and craft. They are managing all of the people who specialize in those areas and giving them a direction to go in. The best relationships I ever had as a gaffer with DPs was when the DP said, I would like the light to come from this side of the frame and have it be broad and soft. And I like the shadows to build up a little on the opposite side, and don't get too bright with the images. The tone of the shot is somber. And I can say, great, I've got plenty to work with there. And then I can go to my team and I can figure out which lights I've got available to work with and apply those and demonstrate a little craft work and show the DP what they asked for, but I can get to it the way I need to get to it based on the logistics of my department and the gear that I'm working with, or whatever they gave me to work with. The worst relationships were when the DP would turn to me and say, okay, I would like you to take a 1000 watt light, put it outside the window, shine it over here, and then take a small 650 over there, put it in the corner, point it back this way, and create an edge light that is a 5.6 at the most. And I want my key light to come in hard at a 4, and that's all I want. At that point, I'm not a gaffer anymore. I'm just a short order cook, and anybody could fill that job. So somebody with my experience and expertise is not necessary. So that's not a productive relationship for me, right? So this is kind of, the auteur is somebody who's telling everybody exactly what to do and not leaving a lot of us any room to be creative and to demonstrate our skill sets and to participate and collaborate. The very meaning of collaboration means several people come together to create one idea with an effort, equally balanced effort from all that are involved, right? It's not the director comes in and starts shooting out a lot of orders to people and then everybody runs in a direction and gives them whatever he asks for, right? That's not a productive relationship. So yes, I blame authorship theory directly for that particular problem. It's a cultural thing, and I think that we're working our way out of it. I think it became a little bit prevalent in the 80s. We saw a transition in DPs by Steven Spielberg from several different very talented cinematographers to one cinematographer. And then it was that cinematographer from then on. Is it because Janusz is that good that the other guys that they just paled in comparison? No. It was the fact that Janusz was very inexperienced when Steven picked him up, and Janusz did whatever Steven said to do. And he never bucked him on that. And he learned to be a cinematographer in the shadow of Steven Spielberg. So now, yes, he's a very competent cinematographer because he's been put through his paces by a very strong director who imposed his will on the cameraman, right? But did he learn that from a variety of different sources and get a well-rounded experience and education as a result? No, he didn't. It's a very one-sided point of view of what cinematography is. And it was only through doing films like The Diving Bell and The Butterfly that he could experience something outside of the Spielberg phenomenon that would inform his cinematography and give him any sense at all of what else was possible other than the glossy look that Steven Spielberg demanded. Okay, so these are the things that we'll talk about through the semester and on into cinematography too, because that's the essence of craft work, really, is understanding what your job is and perfecting your performance. But it is a little bit of a problem, and we'll learn how to approach it on a case-by-case basis. Did I answer that or take you the long way around the block?
No, I assumed I already assumed it was something with a tour, but I just it is. I mean, it makes sense why the actor's name is up there and why the director's name is up there, but it's just kind of weird that like you can't. I realize you can't put everybody's name right first in the credits, obviously. But when I Google a movie and it comes up with a nice little sidebar of information and it constantly would tell me, it tells me who produces the movie before it tells me who actually shot the movie. I'm like, I don't give a I don't care who's bankrolling this thing. I
Well,
don't
they
care
do. That's
who's,
why it's like that. Yeah.
yeah, it's just like like great, cool. I did, John Smith, great. I have no idea who this guy is, and I don't care because he like unless he was actually on the set, which I would hope a producer would want to be, but
It
you
certainly
know,
speaks to the economics of both film and television in this day and age that, for instance, on a TV show, all of the credits on the teaser, which is the first 3 minutes of your TV show before commercial, all of those credits are producers, every one of them. And sometimes now even the director doesn't appear in the first round of credits on a TV show because they're all very proud of the number of people that participated in the financing of that project. But in a weird way, in a backwards way, they're also telling you how desperate the situation is, that they need 12 producers, executive producers that are gathering funding for a TV show when it used to take one or two. So it speaks in many different tongues about the state of the industry that there are that many producers listed in the credits
just
of a TV show.
honestly, something like that. That just sounds to me like somebody who's not creative enough to make something themselves, but is really decent with money is like, hey, I can just pay to get my name out there and feel good about myself because everyone's looking at my name. No, great. I've seen your name. I don't know who you are, but cool. You're the executive producer.
Well, but
What did you produce exactly?
we need those folks too, right? It takes all kinds to make a village. And if you're making movies, unless you're independently wealthy and you're going to finance your own stuff, which would be, any investor will tell you that's the wrong approach, then you're going to need somebody who can fundraise for you. So we need those individuals. The question is, to what extent do we then allow them to influence the product before we have to put our foot down? So it's a
Right.
delicate balance. It's politics, man. That's part of the job. And the cinematographer is right in the middle of a bunch of politics.
Actually,
Not only do you have the money at the top of the food chain that you have
right.
to answer to, you've got a director who may be a real diva and a problem to deal with, and then you've got all of the bitching from the crew. I don't have enough money, I don't have enough guys, I don't have enough gear, I don't have enough time. What color do you want this? When are we going to shoot this? Why did we drop that shot from the list? I worked on it all week. You know, the cinematographer is walking a tightrope between all of the concerns of the craftsman and all of the concerns of the financiers, and still trying to please a director and still trying to create work that you're proud of and that you wouldn't be ashamed to show your mom, right? So that's the problem, right? And that's what we're going to talk about for the whole semester.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. One of the creative people I look up to actually is Todd McFarlane, the creator of Spawn, founder of Image Comics, that guy. And he had an interesting interview one time where they were just going over the general like step by step of like how to be successful, like Todd McFarlane, basically, like what did he do to be where he is now. And one of the things he said was, he doesn't like when people say, oh, never spend your own money. He thinks that's backwards. He's like, always spend your own money because then nobody gets to tell you anything, nobody, because then you're responsible for the thing. And it's just, which is kind of interesting because if you are financing yourself, it's like, hey, the way you spend it, the way you do it, it's, you don't have to worry about the producer anymore, but you still got to get on the art guy. So,
well, even George Lucas needed 20th Century Fox at least once before he was able to fund his own stuff. So, yeah, it's the last resort, and sometimes it's the nuclear option that you have to use. But yeah, I mean, would you rather put your own finances up? Because a film is a risky investment, really. The audience is very fickle, and what they like on Monday might not be what they want on Friday. and you have to know the difference, and you have to interpret the need, and you have to deliver on the expectation. And sometimes that's a big ask. I just want to point out very quickly, because it's 12:24, I'm on Q&A time now, and I've covered the content for the class for this week. So if you want to bow out, you're welcome to do so, or you're welcome to hang out for Q&A, and I will hang out with you folks as long as you want me to. But at this point in time, if you have something pressing and you need to get on with it, feel free to do so. But I'll hang out with you as long as you want, okay? There we go. See that? The tiles are disappearing as we speak. Okay, so that's a really good point. So what you're talking about is the politics of the cinematographer, and it's tough, you know. And when I was younger, I didn't necessarily understand all of these things. I had my particular concerns, and that was what filled up my day. You know, when I was a gaffer, it was all about the lighting. I got to have these tools and this number of crew and this amount of time, and I had to break down the script, and I have to know the plan, and don't change the plan on me because lighting is very complex and it takes a long time to build, and all of these things. And it was lighting, right? And I and I remember when I started shooting, one of my best boys, I promoted him to my gaffer for my own production company. And after the first job that we did, he came to me and he said, wow, thanks for a good day. And I said, well, you know, thank you for a good day. I said, how did I do? And he said, I was totally surprised. His name is Brian. Brian said, I thought you were going to be a real ogre. I said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, you're a gaffer. You've been a gaffer for a long time. And I was afraid that you were going to tell me everything that I was supposed to do, and that I wasn't going to be allowed to see what kind of gaffer I am. And I told him, I said, well, I appreciate that honesty. I said, and I'll tell you a little secret. The minute I took off the gaffer's robes and I put on the helm of the cinematographer, I don't have time to worry about what light you're using anymore, Brian. I'm just going to give you a sense of what I need, and hopefully you're going to produce it for me. And if you get even close, I'm going to use my newfound skills as a cinematographer to interpret what you've given me and find what I need in what you've provided. And I think that was a good learning moment for him as well, and for me, because I was vindicated. I was deemed agreeable to work with as a cameraman, having transcended the lighting department. And I was also confident enough in what I knew at that moment in time that I could trust in Brian to then give me what he thought was appropriate for the situation, as long as he satisfied my prevailing need. Contrast to your soft,
Right.
direct
It's
or indirect,
yeah.
color or
It,
black and white.
it's one of those where you just, you know, you gotta. It's just like, hey, I'm in the big chair right now. Like I pay you. We're paying you to do the lighting. Like, you worry about the lighting. Just, you
Yeah,
know, that's why you're on the
but
payroll.
I mean, as creatives, we're all a little bit sensitive and a bit damaged. So you got to be a little bit softer with your delivery than that. You know, you got to just let them know, hey, you know, just do the best you can. I'll find the good light. If you give me enough light, I'll find the good light. If I got to pan the camera or move it a little bit or crack the lens open, I can do that. Those are my tool sets now. I just need enough light to make a good exposure in the roughly the quality that I've asked you for. Like I said, hard or soft, saturated or desaturated, direct or indirect, black and white or color. And then we'll talk about it together. We're shooting over here. This is what I see through the lens. So that's all you got to light. And then I'll finesse it to get what I need if it's not exactly right coming out of the box. And, you know, that's the job. So that's kind of how that whole bit works. And it's really, it stems a lot from trust and confidence, and then experience, right? If you know a person well enough, you know that you can ask them to deliver something and trust that they'll do it. And then you can walk away and you can go have that conversation with a producer, you know, about, can we add those extra shots onto the end of the day? And you have to explain why you're already working pretty close to the mark, or, yeah, we can, what do you want to do? The politics of the job pulls you away from the details constantly as a cinematographer, to the point where it was like, I felt like I showed up for work, and First I had to work with the wardrobe person. Then I had to go find out, whether or not the makeup person was going to do that thing we talked about. And then I had to go check in with the director and make sure he hadn't changed anything. And then I checked on the gaffer to make sure he got the lights we ordered special for the scene we're shooting today. And then I checked with my own department because I had camera equipment that was ordered special for this day as well. And did we send back the lens that we no longer need from last week, so it's not on the rental payroll anymore, and blah, blah, blah. And then, oh, by the way, turn the camera on and shoot these shots and make them look good. And I felt like, wow, there's a lot more on my plate now as a camera person than there ever was as a department head in any one of the particular crafts, because you're singular of focus when you're a gaffer, and then when you're a cinematographer, you got the big picture and you're responsible for all of it, and it's a juggling act, to say the least. How's that for truth?
I had a question. Do you think the industry is in decline? And if so, why would that be?
It's in transition. I'll give you that for sure. Decline, I don't know. Transition might look like declination from a certain point of view. Like Martin Scorsese was talking in an interview the other day about how he was talking about the death of the theatrical experience, meaning nobody goes to the theaters anymore, whether it's because of COVID or whether it's because that experience is no longer relevant to the modern audience, is a very good question that would take a great deal of academic insight to answer properly. So it looks like the death of cinema, but with the circle of life, if I can be that broad and that melodramatic, reveals to us that with every death there is a birth, right? Every time a door closes, a window opens, right? So if the theater will die as a consequence of the modern audience not needing that kind of experience, what will take its place? Well, what's taking its place is things like Netflix and the online streaming catalogs from all of the major studios at this point that have their content on your TV through your Fire Stick or whatever, that you can access. It's a different way of approaching the content. You're still watching the movie, but now you're defining what venue you want to receive that information or to receive that story. In the old days, people went to the theater because they didn't have televisions, because it wasn't invented yet. So theater was really important to people around the beginning of the last century. And as the television was introduced and that technology approached the market, suddenly the theatrical feature film presentation was threatened by the little box in your living room that could show you content that entertained you as well. So then movies had to compete with television to draw audiences back into the theater. This is where we got the whole anamorphic phenomenon from. Okay, there's nothing special about anamorphics in terms of its let me rephrase that. Anamorphics are very important in terms of compositional choices and presentation. They make wonderful spectacle because it's designed to fill huge screens, and it's designed to draw people into the sanctity of ooh, ah in the theater, right? That you can't get necessarily in your living room, right? That's why churches are so big and ornate, right? They want you as the audience to walk in and feel the undeniable presence of God, right? In the architecture, in the art, in the magnificence and splendor of the place, the palatial volume of the church. Well, the theater was kind of the same thing for people for a very long time, but the television became more personal, became more accessible, became more diverse. If there's one movie playing in one theater in your town, then you don't have much choice in terms of what content to watch. But at home on your TV, you have all the channels and all the TV shows and everything to choose from. And you start pruning and tailoring your visual experience to a variety of assets on television that you don't have in the theaters. Including old movies that are no longer in the theaters that you can only watch as replayed on a DVD or on the movie of the week, right? So television, in a lot of ways, ushered in new things and killed other things. And now digital is ushering in new things and killing other things, right? Namely film stocks and the way movies are manufactured using digital content now as opposed to film recording media. So it's evolving, it's changing. The paradigm is shifting from analog to digital, right? And that's a lot of adjustment for a lot of people. And there's some emotional stresses that are taking place. There's some economic stresses that are taking place. And there's a changing of the guard a little bit too. The folks that are unwilling to embrace the new paradigm and they're retiring, saying, nope, I'm a film guy. And if I can't do film, I'm not doing it anymore. That's happening. Then you have people that said, man, I never had access to film before. It was too much of an exclusive club. Digital has offered me a voice that I never had before. And so they are joining the industry now. So it's a little bit of a revolving door, and it's hard to interpret all of the signs and get a straight answer. But what I don't think is happening is I don't think we're seeing a death of cinema. We're seeing an evolution of cinema. You may not like the direction it's moving in, but I don't think it's dying. I just think it's changing into something else. And that's the
Do
best
you
way I
think
can answer.
that's a great answer? Do you think the year 2020 and the COVID, everything, everybody going to their houses and going on streaming services, do you think that has kickstarted that, I guess, revolution towards streaming services?
For sure, because the theaters were closed for a good 6 months down here, if not longer. And then they opened to, COVID restrictions in terms of how many people can go into a theater and how far away they have to sit and so forth. And they closed the concessions down. And yeah, COVID really put a dent in the economics of the theater going lifestyle. And cable stepped up to fit the bill. You could say nicely, or you could say whatever your opinion is of it. I don't think it hurts to have all access to all of the content now. I think it's kind of nice that I can talk to my Fire Stick controller and say, Alexa, show me, this movie, and bam, it'll find it in the Ethernet and it'll tell me where I can access it. And if I don't have the app already, I download it, and then, I can either watch it for free or maybe pay a couple bucks to see it if I don't already have it on my shelf as a DVD. Um, I kind of like that freedom. I don't watch regular TV anymore because I don't need to. I'm not a slave to the broadcast schedule anymore like you used to be. The movie of the week came on at 9 o'clock on X day of the week. And if you couldn't be available for that, you missed the show unless you had a VCR and you recorded it. But now it's like, oh, well, I missed it on Monday night, but I'll watch it Tuesday morning over breakfast because that's when I can afford the time to invest in this, and I can watch it at my own speed. That's kind of nice. But on the other hand, I'm also a romantic, right? And I remember in my younger days going out on a date. Dinner and a movie is kind of a mode that everybody knows, and you go out and you see a really neat movie with your favorite significant other, and maybe you have some popcorn and something to drink, and you sit back and you enjoy a really good movie. And that was nice. And sometimes it's nice to see a movie in a big room with a lot of other people because you can sort of feed off of their enthusiasm. And then other times you want that experience to be very personal, and you might watch the movie at home on a DVD or on Netflix, and enjoy it that way. And I must say, I really love the idea of having a massive television in my living room that feels like the theater experience when I sit 8 feet away, because then I can sort of at least simulate the feeling that I have when I go to the real theater. The only difference is there's not 200 people in my living room, thank God. But, sometimes it's okay to watch it like that. There's something to be said about seeing a movie projected, though. If it was shot on film and projected on film and you see it projected in the theater, there is a patina to it, a quality to it that's very unique. You can simulate it with digital, but it's not quite the same thing. Now, somebody who's not a student of the process may not appreciate the difference between seeing a projected film and seeing a digital representation of that film. And then they're merely relying on the other craft work and the quality of the story to lead them through their visual experience. It's a question of who you're talking to, and that's one of the interesting things about the business is the audience is diverse and subjective, and collectively they'll give us some sense of whether we're doing it right or doing it wrong. And then beyond that, you have a variety of different points of view. Hopefully you can capture as many of them as possible. And then some people you won't be able to please, and that's okay too, I suppose. Unfortunate for them, but unrealistic for you to expect that you can please everybody with the work that you do. Cast as broad a net as you can, and then hope that that's enough. But at the end of the day, really, the only audience you really have to please is yourself, right? Now, you may not get paid if you got a real weird freak flag point of view on what a good movie is, but if making that movie your way versus doing it somebody else's way and selling out for a paycheck doesn't sit with you, then that's going to define your career for you too. You're going to have a day job to pay the bills. And then on the weekends, you're going to make your whatever it is you're into movie, and that might be the way your career goes. I picked the Hollywood model, I wanted to make the kind of movies that I would go spend $15 to see in the theater, or at the time, $10 or $12. I wanted to be associated with that because I knew there was an audience, and I knew if I could please that audience, which was basically the public sphere, which is the hardest audience to please, the broad public sphere. If you could please them, then you're probably doing a pretty good job. So I went for that route, you know. So to each his own, right? That's why you need to decide what the film industry means to you and pursue that, as opposed to just pursuing, the Hollywood model, because maybe the Hollywood model doesn't fit with your sensibility. If it does, though, don't be afraid to walk up and punch it in the mouth, because you have to know. You have to know, am I any good at this or not? If I'm not, I could probably spend my time more wisely doing something else for a living, and then just doing this on the side to please my creative impulses. You got to go to the mountain. The mountain will not come to you. And when you get there, punch it right in the mouth and find out whether or not you've got it. And then use that information. It's good intelligence, right? Use it. I'm going to be good at this and I'm going to succeed, or I'm not cut out for this. Don't like LA, or I don't like the going to work at 5 a.m. at the studios in Hermosa Beach when I live in Lancaster, or whatever the problem is, but you got to know, so that so that question doesn't nag you till you're 75. Just go do it, figure it out, decide if you like it or not, and then stick with it or change gears. That's all we can do. We should end on that note. I think I knocked it out of the park with that one.
Yeah, that was a great response.
I don't think we can. You want to talk about the weather?
I actually wanted to throw in about the theater experiences though. I'm very much like for shows, I'm completely with you on cable. Cable is dead to me now, because ever since like getting away from cable and not having it in my house for a long time after I moved out, I'm just like, okay, I don't have a cable box anymore. I have no interest in commercials. I watch things on my time. But me and a buddy did go to like John Wick, because a movie like John Wick, you can't just sit at home with that. Like that's that kind of experience.
Which
and
one?
So it hits. We went to see the fourth one. I think he has 4. I always forget if it's 3 or 4, or it's weird because 3 and 4 is like it's like a part 1, part 2 in that. I don't know. It just kind of keeps going. Anyway, I believe it was number 4, the Parabellum. And we're in the theater, and it's like me and him here, kind of up in the back, and then there's like a couple people over here, and everybody's kind of spread out a little bit. It's kind of whatever. This was before the plague. And then there's these two guys that were just like down several rows in front of us and all the way to the left, like right up against the wall. And they're sitting there like way away from everybody else. I don't know what this guy was on. I don't know what his deal was, but every time in the movie that Keanu Reeves' character would like hit somebody hard or like hit him with a really high powered weapon, and it was just had a good impact to it, this dude would bust out laughing. And about zero point 0.3 seconds after that, everybody else felt compelled to laugh off that guy. So it was like it changed the very serious hardcore fight scenes that we saw into this hilarious just sort of, it was kind of like if Buster Keaton was in the Matrix. It became this comedy for no reason, but it kind of enhanced the situation too. And you couldn't get that at your house. Like you weren't going to run into a guy that for some reason was laughing at John Wick. It was just, it's
right.
one of those that just feels good to see. It's like, yeah, this is nice. This is a different experience.
Changed the whole dynamic of the audience, didn't he?
Yeah.
So that's risky. That can go one of two ways, right? The audience can boo you right out of the room and throw popcorn at you, or you can change the dynamic of the audience. And when you change the dynamic of the audience, you may be directing them in the direction that they were meant to go in the first place. I know that comedians do that a lot, especially young comedians who are working the hardcore circuits, the bars and the suds houses here, and what they'll do is they'll bring in ringers in the audience to just laugh at everything they say, whether it's funny or not. Because if there's somebody in the room that's laughing at the joke, maybe you just didn't get it right away and you'll laugh out of social graces or, being uncomfortable, thinking that maybe you missed the point entirely and you don't want anybody to think you're a dope. So you'll laugh, right? And they do that. They'll seed the audience with people that'll laugh at their jokes so that if they're really bombing, there'll still be somebody in the room that's laughing and either give them the confidence to keep going or shift the dynamic of the audience from from not liking the presentation to enjoying it. That's
Plant
interesting.
audience members.
I don't tolerate that in the theater, though. I hate it. The last thing I want to hear is somebody's conversation right behind me, or them texting and laughing at somebody's joke on their phone while we're trying to watch a movie. Because I'm like, if you're going to do that, why don't you go out in the lobby or the parking lot? We're in here trying to watch a film, and you're ruining it for the rest of us who don't care what your date was like last night.
Right.
Only everybody cares.
No. Another way to solve that though that I've experienced, and another level of like the theater experience for me over the years is I would go to the normal theater where you're like, packed in there right next to people. And then me and some guys, we went out to Universal City Walk, right? And out there they have the big fancy, I think it's an AMC theater or whatever. And it's, it's multi-level, got the escalators and everything, big fancy place. I didn't know what was in this theater. I thought it was a normal theater. No, apparently you go in there, it has like there's like 7 recliners on every row. So there's not even that many people in the room to start with. Recliners, cup holders, you're just comfy. And they put a dividing like wall up at just the right angle on every row so that when you look at it, all you can see is the bottom of the screen and up. So you just see the screen perfectly framed. You don't see the back of anybody's head. So it was just me, couple of buddies to my left. We were all alone in our own row. I had my Coke and my Milk Duds, and I'm reclining in this chair, and I'm watching the new Sonic movie, and I'm just like, this is nice.
Yeah, yeah.
And after doing that, I'm like, if I'm going to go to the movies, I'll just take a trip out to City Walk. I'm really going to bother going to the movies,
Was that COVID protocol or was that before COVID?
That was well before. So that was like, yeah. Again, I haven't been out for a while. Like everybody else, I haven't been in the theater since, So yeah,
I don't like the sardine design, no matter what it is, whether it's an airplane seat or whether it's a seat in an auditorium for a movie theater. I don't like being. I don't want to have to compete with the slob next to me for the armrest. I don't want to hear the conversation. I don't want to smell the hot dog, which is going to compel me to go get one in the middle of the film and miss something, right? I want to enjoy the movie. Now, I don't mind the audience being there if we're all like-minded, conscientious individuals, but sometimes that's a big ask. So um, my response to that was, I have an enormous DVD collection, and they're not Blu-rays because I'm not going to go back out and rebuy all that stuff at a higher price point to see an extra 2K that I can't really see anyway if I sit any further back than 8 feet from my screen. So I have, several hundred DVDs, and I can put, some of that's for research, some of it is my favorite movies that I want to make sure I have a copy of. Some of it is movies that I've worked on, so I have copies of that as documentation, and for further research and for demonstration now that I teach. Um, as a consequence, I have an absolute buttload of DVDs, right? And then I don't have cable TV anymore either. I got rid of it, and all I have is Fire Stick, and Fire Stick is all I need, you know. So between Fire Stick and DVDs, I got it covered at home. And then if it's new stuff, I'm going to go see it. There you go. 2K or 4K?
It's whatever the base model is. It's the Fire Stick Lite.
2K. Okay. Well, in my service area, I was told the 2K might buffer a lot, so I got the 4K version. And it's okay. But hey, it's better than what cable used to be, right? So, I do that. If it's the first run of a brand new movie, I like to go see it in the theater because I just want to see it massive. I want to see the big frame, and I want to feel what the cinematographer intended me to feel on that presentation medium before I see it at home. And then I can compare the difference mentally when I watch the DVD in my own house a second or third time. But at least for the first time, I like to see a movie in the theater, to get the full experience. And then if I like it a lot, I'll buy the DVD and I'll watch it again at home, or I'll wait for it to come out on HBO or something.
I like going into the theaters, not just for the huge screen, but for like the sound design. You know how you have all the speakers surrounding you, you get the
Yeah.
whole experience of the film.
Yeah, because it's been tuned, and I don't have that in my. I did once upon a time in my old house. I had the theater set up where it was tuned to the room. I don't have that now, so I just got regular old junk, which I've learned to accept and be okay with. But yeah, the surround sound experience is part of it. I also do it out of a sense of commitment to the industry that supported me my whole life. My income, my life was predicated on whether or not people went to the theater to watch the movies we were making. So if I wasn't willing to go see my own stuff, let alone anybody else's, how could I expect to have a career in the industry that was going to sustain me over my lifetime? And it did for the most part, 30 years. That's asking a lot. So I do it partly out of that. And I don't know if you guys know this or not, but as filmmakers, especially when you're going to have a degree that says you're a professional filmmaker of some variety, anytime you go to the movie theater, you can deduct that, right? It's part of your professional ecosystem, your research, your market survey, your networking, your keeping up with the industry best practices by going and seeing what is being done on current Hollywood productions and applying those techniques to your own work. It's all a justifiable expense. And so buy like a Regal card or something like that and then deduct it on your income taxes. It's totally a fair move, and you should do it because it supports the industry. If you hope to eke a living out of this thing someday, then you should support the financial ecosystem that will one day support you, right? It's just what it is. So, I go to the theater for, those very important reasons, not just because it's the best way to see it, but it's economically smart for me as a career filmmaker. And there is a certain intention that's put, I mean, especially if you like Christopher Nolan movies, he's not making movies for your TV, he's making movies for the theater screen. And so you have to go there to get the full impact of his communicative vision. And then once you've heard that interpretation, then you can go home and watch it on your TV later because you'll have that embedded memory of the spectacle to sort of reinforce what you see on your TV screen. But you can't get the impact of gravity on your TV without having seen it first in the theater. Seeing it in the theater is like, wow, you know, you really feel like what it feels like to be an astronaut in the beginning of that sequence when you see George Clooney bombing around on the jetpack and the earth is down below and you're seeing it on an IMAX screen and you're in a stadium seat that's, you know, right at the nodal point of the projection. So the earth is like floating right below your chair in the theater. I mean, that's important interpretation that you only get from the live presentation. And then when you see it at home, it pales in comparison. So that's my take on it.
That's an excellent point. I have to head off though. I've got a class in like an hour I've got to get ready for.
Yeah,
thank you for all the answers.
Thank you. Thanks for sticking it out the whole way. As Rich Eisen says, congratulations, you made it to the end. Thanks for that. So it's 12:55 and we are out of time, ladies and gentlemen. So I say we adjourn this meeting and you guys have a great 4th of July. I won't have a live presentation on Monday the 5th. That is your holiday in practice on the part of UCF, but there will be a pre-recorded lecture that you can watch and everything is on the LMS. And then I'll see you on Wednesday, the, 7th, right? Okay. So do I have a second to adjourn? Excellent.
3rd, 5th, 4th, all that. I think it's lunchtime. everybody
all right,
it's time to go.
Well, thanks for coming and hanging out with me today. I appreciate it. If you have any further questions, yes.
No, sorry, I just said have a good one.
Oh, thank you. You too. If there's anything that I haven't touched on or any answers that you still need, feel free to reach out to me on email. Otherwise, have a good holiday, folks, and I'll see you next week.
You as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a nice 4th of July.
You too. Whoops. Oh, there we go. Whoops.